Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Manijay Staran. Manijay Staran was born on May 23, 1989. Little is known about her childhood, except that she had an older brother by the age of 34. She was living in a small apartment and struggling financially. She also dealt with mental health issues. Manijay worked hard to overcome these challenges to create a safe and comfortable environment for her children. But it was a difficult journey. Her relatives had to help care for her children. Her life continued without major changes until something unexpected happened. On May 1, 2023, the St. Paul police received a disturbing call from Manijay's father. He had last spoken to her on April 23, and she seemed very scared. He believed that she was afraid of her boyfriend. The police began searching for her, but did not find her in her apartment. A man who claimed to be the father of one of Manijay's children also reported that he had not heard from her for a long time. It was unusual for her to go silent for so long, as she was in regular contact with him because they had a child together, according to him. Their last conversation had been on April 21, 2023. The police also spoke with a neighbor of Manijay's who had disturbing information. One day, she noticed a bruise under Manijay's eye and a red mark on her neck. When the neighbor asked if she had been attacked, Manijay confirmed that she had. The neighbor suggested calling the police, but Manijay begged her not to, fearing it would make things worse. This allegation of assault further complicated the investigation and added to the complexity of Manijay's situation. A number of important pieces of information were uncovered, revealing that Manijay had a boyfriend named Joseph Stephen Jorgensen, who frequently visited her apartment, although his last name was not listed on the lease. The manager provided the police with his phone number. It was confirmed that the phone number belonged to Joseph, a man in his 40s. The manager identified him in a photo, confirming that he was the one who had visited Manijay. This discovery was a major development in the case. The police obtained recordings from surveillance cameras located near the apartment, which provided crucial evidence. At 6 p.m. on April 23, the cameras recorded Manijay, clearly upset. Hurriedly leaving her apartment, she was quickly tackled by Joseph, who pulled her inside. This is the last recorded footage. Video analysis showed Joseph frequently entering and exiting the apartment between April 21 and April 28. The manager raised concerns when he mentioned that there was only one set of keys for residents, despite the footage clearly showing Joseph using his own key to open the door each time. At approximately 5 p.m. on April 28, Joseph was caught on camera leaving the apartment with a suitcase and a duffel bag. He loaded the luggage into a pickup truck and drove away quickly. Police later discovered that the truck belonged to a resident of the apartment building. Police also spoke with a friend of Manijay, who had valuable information about her lifestyle and her relationship with Joseph. The friend explained that although Manijay struggled with drug addiction, she always kept in touch with her family and never went more than a day without contacting them. Therefore, her absence for several days raised alarms. The friend also recounted a phone conversation with Joseph after Manijay went missing. Joseph claimed that Manijay went to the store but did not return, according to the family friend. Joseph expressed concern that a man named Kyle might pose a threat to Manijay. After Manijay went missing, Joseph took no action. He did not report her absence to the police and continued with his daily life. He was the last person to be in the apartment before she went missing. Concerned and with mounting evidence, police entered Manijay's apartment with the building manager and quickly discovered alarming signs. The bedroom window was broken. In the living room, they found a television with a severely cracked screen, which the manager confirmed had never been damaged before. As they continued their search, police found broken glass on the microwave, with shards scattered throughout the bedroom. The mattress had a large hole in it, and there were red marks on the bed, which raised suspicions. The anxiety surrounding Manijay's disappearance grew, revealing a troubling array of evidence. On May 25, after completing the necessary legal procedures, officers obtained a search warrant and processed Manijay's apartment for vital evidence. Experts discovered a disturbing scene. There was a large amount of blood in the living room and kitchen, especially on the sofa and floor. Police confirmed that efforts had been made to clean up the scene. It was clear that someone had been seriously injured or possibly dead in the apartment. Preliminary analysis confirmed that blood samples taken from the scene belonged to Manijay. As officers continued their investigation, they uncovered important information about her finances. They discovered that she had received government assistance in Minnesota through electronic benefit transfers, which allow recipients to make purchases directly at retail stores. Police quickly realized the significance of this discovery and obtained a warrant to access Manijay's account records. They found a series of transactions made after her disappearance. One notable transaction occurred on May 9, 2023, when Joseph used Manijay's card to withdraw cash from a highway ATM that same day. He made a purchase at a store, buying items such as a cleaning bucket, 2 boxes of paper towels, trash bags, liquid detergent, gloves, and disinfectant wipes. The strange combination of items aroused the police's suspicions. On May 11, Joseph used Manijay's card again. This time at a grocery store. He also went to a hardware store, where he purchased more paper towels, cleaning supplies, and disinfectant wipes. The repeated purchases of these items further raised concerns about Joseph's actions and intentions. Police obtained a warrant to access information associated with Joseph's Google account. After reviewing the data, they discovered a series of significant internet searches made by him. On May 1, he searched for how to report a missing person. On May 3, Joseph searched for methods to delete files. On May 23, he inquired about removing Jeeps from a scooter. Finally, on June 4, he read about lime for soil. It is important to note that lime is a substance that can accelerate the decomposition of a body and eliminate the associated odor. The investigation team was aware of this, raising their concerns about Joseph's potential involvement in Manijay's disappearance. With compelling evidence against him, they obtained a search warrant for his home. On June 26, a special weapons and tactics team arrived at Joseph's home, prepared for a potentially dangerous situation. When police confronted him in the apartment, he resisted and barricaded himself in his bedroom, shocking everyone present. He lit a fire to escalate the situation. The special weapons and tactics team proceeded with extreme caution, but were unable to apprehend him. He resisted aggressively and even attempted to grab one of the officers' weapons. Joseph was eventually restrained and taken to a local hospital for evaluation to rule out any mental health issues that might have influenced his behavior at the time of his arrest. There were 2 other people in the apartment, including an unidentified woman. She was injured, with bruises, scratches, and a red mark on her neck. The woman later reported to the police that Joseph had choked her and threatened her with violence, claiming that the neighbors would not hear her screams. The second person living in the apartment was Joseph's roommate. When the task force arrived, he hid in his bedroom, where he was discovered and arrested. He later informed the St. Paul Police Department that he had suffered a traumatic brain injury, which had resulted in a loss of smell. He also mentioned his long-standing relationship with Joseph and explained that, due to his busy Monday through Friday work schedule, he rarely interacted with Joseph or the women Joseph brought to the apartment. The roommate also noted that he had only met Manijay once or twice and emphasized that he did not have a close relationship with her. When the roommate asked Joseph about Manijay's whereabouts, Joseph told him that she had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The man also admitted that he had used Manijay's money. Joseph had given him her card and PIN, leading him to believe that he had access to the account. Police interviewed the manager of the residential complex where Joseph lived. He reported that on May 15 or 16, 2023, residents complained about a foul odor coming from Joseph's apartment. The manager noted that it resembled the stench of a dead animal. To determine the source of the odor, on May 18, the manager and a maintenance worker attempted to enter Joseph's apartment to investigate. However, Joseph acted aggressively and blocked their path. The manager then instructed Joseph and his roommate to clean the apartment and gave them a week to do so. Shortly thereafter, both the manager and maintenance staff saw Joseph carrying large black duffel bags out of the apartment. The sight shocked witnesses, who began to speculate about what might be in the bags. The forensic team from the St. Paul Police Department conducted an investigation of Joseph's apartment. During the search, they discovered more evidence. Their report noted a significant amount of blood in the bathroom and in his closet. There was a foul odor in his home that matched the odors reported by residents. They also discovered other biological material found in the home. After arresting Joseph, the police accessed Jeep's data from his phone, which pointed to a storage facility where Joseph rented a room with a refrigerator through his roommate. Realizing the importance of this clue, they obtained a search warrant for the storage facility. On June 28, the police began investigating the location. As they approached the storage facility, they immediately smelled a very unpleasant odor. The police decided to cut the lock to gain access. Once inside, they discovered containers wrapped in plastic, a blue gym bag, and a small suitcase. Notably, one of these bags was similar to the one Joseph was seen carrying out of Manage's apartment in the surveillance footage. They also found a green bag containing cleaning products similar to those Joseph had previously purchased, sitting on top of the refrigerator. On the advice of forensic experts, the police carefully removed the containers and sports bags from the refrigerator, from which the foul odor was emanating. The contents were inaccessible until they were sent to the medical examiner for further analysis. After X-rays were taken, it was discovered that all of the containers contained human remains. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner then conducted an autopsy and determined that all of the body parts were carefully packaged, wrapped in multiple layers of paper, film, and bags. Opening these packed remains was a laborious process. Tests confirmed that the remains belonged to Manijay Starin. With identification made through her tattoos and dental records, the police again reviewed surveillance footage from Manijay's home. Focusing on the bags Joseph carried, he had handling of the body Manijay's in her apartment. Sorting her remains into different bags and carrying them out, Joseph faces multiple charges, including second-degree murder and arson for setting fire to his apartment during a confrontation with the Special Weapons and Tactics team. He is also charged with threatening and disarming a police officer. On June 30, 2023, Joseph Stephen Jorgensen had an afternoon court hearing regarding the murder charge. Throughout the trial, Joseph shook his head while listening to the assistant district attorney announce that his bail was set at $5 million. The judge remained largely silent throughout the proceedings. Joseph's attorney requested a bail hearing for later. It is believed that a detailed defense strategy is currently being developed. On the same day, Joseph appeared in court. St. Paul Police Sergeant Ernster held a press conference to discuss a significant event that occurred during the ongoing investigation. Fanta Zayavong was also reported missing. She was last seen in July 2021 with Joseph. This new information prompted the police to immediately begin searching for her. During the press conference, it was announced that Fanta Zayavong's remains had been discovered in a separate storage facility in North Minneapolis, approximately 30 miles from where Manijay's body was found. Details about the second victim have not been released, but many believe that Joseph was directly involved in her murder. Manijay's family has expressed gratitude to the police for any leads in the ongoing investigation. If Joseph is convicted of second-degree murder, he could face a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. His next court appearance, originally scheduled for August 21, has been postponed for unknown reasons. Joseph Stephen Jorgensen remains in custody at the Ramsey County Jail.
Lori K. Soares Hacking was born on December 31, 1976, and was adopted by Thelma and Iraldo Soares. They formerly lived in Fullerton, California. Iraldo is a Spanish and Portuguese teacher at Sunny Hills High School and a native of Piracicaba, Brazil. He met Thelma while they were both serving as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Rio de Janeiro. Lori's parents divorced in 1987. Thelma and Lori moved to Orem, Utah the following year. In Orem, she attended Orem High School, where she was known for her organizational skills, determination, and vibrant personality. During high school, Lori met Mark Douglas Hacking. Their relationship quickly grew. They became a well-known couple, attending all the homecoming dances and proms together, appearing just like any other young couple in love. Mark, who was helpful and reliable, often spent time at Lori's house, assisting with errands, home repairs. This earned him a special place in Lori's family's hearts. Lori's brother jokingly felt jealous, as Mark received more attention from their mother and Lori than he did. However, Lori's family genuinely appreciated Mark's kindness and support. Lori and Mark's youthful romance blossomed into a strong relationship, leading to their marriage on August 7, 1999. By 2004, Lori was working as an assistant manager at a financial institution, while Mark, who had just graduated from the University of Utah, was preparing to start medical school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Mark's decision to pursue medicine was expected, as he came from a well-educated family with several doctors, including his father and brothers, while another brother worked in government. In the summer of 2004, Lori and Mark planned to move to North Carolina. Lori, who was pregnant, was excited about the relocation, as was her mother, Thelma, who was eager to become a grandmother. Thelma hoped for a granddaughter with big curls like Lori's. On July 19, 2004, Lori, who was 27 years old and 5 months pregnant, suddenly disappeared. At around 5:15 a.m., she went for her usual jog at Memory Grove Park and City Creek Canyon before heading to work in Salt Lake City. When she did not return that afternoon, her boss contacted Mark. Concerned for her safety, Mark quickly called the police to report her missing. Mark arrived at Memory Grove Park at 10:07 a.m., aware that it was the last place Lori was supposed to be. He found her car in the parking lot, but the park was unusually quiet, making his heart race with fear. Patrol officers greeted him outside the park and updated detectives on Lori's disappearance. They feared the worst, thinking she might have fallen into the canyon, gotten injured, and become trapped in the thick woods. Given the situation, the patrol officers believed it was essential to involve homicide detectives. The steep canyon walls heightened their concern, as they worried that the pregnant woman might have been hurt and needed urgent help. Lori Hacking's mysterious disappearance shocked the community, leading to a flood of support from friends and family. Her husband, Mark Hacking, was visibly distraught as he appealed for help in locating his missing wife. His public requests for assistance caught the attention of various media outlets, and he eagerly spoke to any reporter asking about Lori, expressing his deep worry and asking for help in the search. Officers from the Salt Lake City Police Department are actively investigating the case and have organized a large-scale search at Memory Grove Park. They are seeking the help of at least 3,000 volunteers to assist in searching for Lori or any evidence that she may have been present in the area. Many homes are located along the path leading to Memory Grove Park, where Lori was reportedly last seen. The officers are thoroughly canvassing the area, looking for anyone who might have witnessed something unusual. Lori is easily recognizable with her distinctive bushy dark curls, and the officers believe residents would likely remember her. Their hopes were momentarily lifted when a woman claimed to have seen Lori near Memory Grove that morning, but she later retracted her statement. As the search for Lori continued, the Salt Lake City Police Department established a command post near the entrance of the park. Mark's brothers and Lori's mother arrived at the scene. One of Mark's brothers suggested checking a homeless encampment in the canyon, voicing concerns about the potential involvement of those living there in Lori's disappearance. The detectives understood the importance of exploring all avenues and decided to investigate the encampment. There are no suspicious signs here. They realized that uncovering the truth would be challenging and that every detail needed thorough examination. Detectives arrived at Mark and Lori Hacking's home. They were already aware that in many missing persons cases, the partner is often the primary suspect. They also considered the possibility that Lori might have had a romantic relationship with someone else, which could have played a role in her disappearance. The detectives asked Mark for permission to enter their apartment and to obtain a recent photograph of Lori for their missing person flyer. Mark agreed, allowing them to enter the apartment. After entering the residence, the detectives asked Mark for permission to do a quick search, which he agreed to. During the search, one detective found a red handbag that belonged to Lori. Inside the handbag was Lori's wallet, complete with her identification and credit cards. The detectives were puzzled as to why Lori would go to Memory Grove Park for exercise, leaving her car near the entrance but not taking her purse with her. Additionally, the detective spotted a large bouquet of flowers on the kitchen counter, which led her to believe that Mark had bought them for Lori as an apology. This detail raised her suspicion about potential issues in their marriage, as she recalled that husbands often give large bouquets to express remorse. While investigating the bathroom, the detective noted that it was exceptionally clean and had a strong smell of bleach, suggesting someone had recently scrubbed it with disinfectant. This finding intrigued the detective, as it indicated an effort to hide something. In the bedroom, she observed a set of sheets on the bed that looked brand new, with visible creases and no signs of having been washed. When she checked Lori's jewelry box, she noticed that Lori's wedding band was missing, which struck her as odd. The detective wondered why a happily married woman would not be wearing her wedding ring. Mark met YTH, a detective at the police department, for an interview. The detective asked him questions about his marriage, and Mark claimed that everything was fine. Given the growing evidence and suspicions against him, this statement seemed questionable. Mark mentioned that he and Lori were packing to move to North Carolina, where he would soon start medical school. This information caught the detective's attention, and she became curious about his intended specialty. When she asked, Mark surprised her by saying he would specialize in oncology. As the interview progressed, the detective closely observed Mark's behavior. He seemed to be crying, but they never saw any tears, which made them suspicious and led them to believe that he might be pretending. They felt deep inside that something terrible had happened to Lori, suspected Mark was involved, but they still hoped Lori was alive and could be saved. The detectives asked Mark for permission to search his red truck. While they searched the vehicle, Mark was present. On the seat, the detective found a receipt from a mattress company dated the same day Lori went missing. This raised questions. Why would Mark buy a new mattress on the day his pregnant wife disappeared? Determined to find more evidence, they returned to Mark's apartment and asked for his signature on a consent form that would allow a more thorough search. Mark agreed, giving the detectives permission to enter his home. Once inside, the detective confronted him with a receipt they had found. They also noticed a new mattress on Mark and Lori's bed. This finding prompted further questioning. The detective asked Mark about the mismatched mattress and box spring, suggesting it had been bought recently. Mark's reaction indicated that this struck a nerve. While continuing their search, the detectives made another discovery that heightened their suspicions. They found several knives on the nightstand next to Mark's bed. One knife was hidden in a sheath, and when they examined it, they noticed red stains on the blade, which they suspected were human blood. When questioned about it, Mark claimed he used the knife for hunting. When the detective found the knife, they stopped the consensual search of the house and called in a crime scene investigation team. They started working on getting a search warrant because they believed something serious had happened in Lori's home. While checking the area, detectives noticed a trash can in the parking lot, leading them to suspect that Mark had killed his wife and dumped her body in the trash. Around the same time, the night watch officer informed the police investigating Lori's disappearance that Mark had been seen running around naked at a local motel. This incident increased suspicions about Mark's involvement and added to the evidence suggesting he played a role in Lori's disappearance. When an officer arrived at the motel, he found Mark behaving oddly and completely naked. However, the officer observed that Mark had the presence of mind to put on his shoes before running around the parking lot, which made the officer suspect that Mark was pretending to act strangely. A person in an abnormal state would not even realize they were walking barefoot. That afternoon, a detective visited Mark at the hospital and was surprised to see that he showed no signs of emotional distress. Instead, he appeared relaxed and content, enjoying pizza and watching television. The detective began the interview by asking the same questions as before. Mark maintained that Lori had never returned home from her morning jog. During the interview, Douglas Hacking, Mark's father, was present and urged him to be truthful if he had done something wrong. However, Mark looked back at his father with a determined expression, insisting that he had not done anything. Douglas was confident in his son's honesty and believed him. While the investigation into Lori's disappearance was ongoing, detectives received information from officials at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. They informed the detectives that Mark Hacking, who was supposed to start an oncology program there, was not enrolled and that they had no record of him. They presented this information to Thelma, Lori's mother, hoping to clarify Mark's true intentions. Initially, Thelma refused to accept the detectives' claims, perceiving them as mere speculation. However, her disbelief wavered when the detectives revealed that Mark had never graduated from the University of Utah. This shocking revelation made Thelma reconsider past events, and she recalled signs that something was off. At Mark's supposed graduation ceremony, she remembered hearing him sick in the bathroom, which prevented him from attending the event. They believed that Mark's deception had finally caught up with him, which might have contributed to Lori's disappearance. On July 20, 2004, one day after Lori went missing, a store clerk from a nearby shop reported an important detail to the detectives. The clerk recalled that on the evening of July 18 at 9:45 p.m., Lori and Mark entered the store and bought a soda. The detectives reviewed the store's CCTV footage from that time and confirmed the clerk's story. The video showed Lori wearing green scrub-style pants and a tan shirt, along with Mark as they entered the store. This was believed to be the last confirmed sighting of Lori alive. The search for Lori lasted 3 days and involved hundreds of volunteers. Her mother, Thelma, made a heartfelt appeal to the public, urging anyone who might have Lori to release her, emphasizing the extreme heat in the canyon, which often exceeded 100 degrees in July. Despite the challenging conditions, the search efforts remained strong. Meanwhile, Mark was in the hospital recovering from a mental health crisis. His brothers, Scott and Lance Hacking, growing suspicious of his potential involvement in Lori's disappearance, confronted him again. On July 24, 2004, Mark eventually confessed to killing Lori. He explained that she had found out he was not actually a graduate of the University of Utah, where he claimed to be attending medical school in North Carolina. This revelation devastated Lori, making her feel betrayed. Before she could file for divorce, Mark took drastic action by shooting her and disposing of her body in a dumpster. After Mark admitted to his brothers, the search for Lori in the canyon shifted to the landfill. Nearly 30 officers were sent to the 10-acre landfill to search for her body. In the 2 days following the disposal, they had to sift through a massive amount of waste. First-degree murder charges were filed against Mark Hacking on August 9, 2004. The search for Lori was extensive and physically challenging, especially with the high temperatures. Many agencies and professionals worked together in this effort. They used cadaver dogs and equipment like earth movers to help find any evidence. These tools were essential in narrowing down the search area and uncovering important leads. On October 1, 2004, at 8:20 a.m., human remains were discovered in the landfill. This was a major breakthrough in the case, bringing hope for answers regarding Lori's disappearance. The remains were carefully examined and identified using dental records, confirming that they belonged to Lori Hacking. This information provided a clear conclusion to the search, offering some closure for her family. On April 15, 2005, Lori's husband, Mark Hacking, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced on June 6, 2005, to 6 years to life in prison. The Utah State Board of Pardons later stated that he would not be eligible for parole until 2035. That means Hacking will face a minimum of 30 years in prison. Board Chairman Mike Sibbett emphasized that the hearing does not guarantee a release date. He stated that there were several aggravating factors in Hacking's case that merited a stay. He emphasized that Hacking obstructed justice by disposing of Lori's body and falsely claiming she was missing. In honor of Lori, her family chose to remove Mark Hacking's last name from her headstone. This decision aimed to celebrate Lori's memory and assert her independence in light of Mark's actions, emphasizing her individuality and the strength she showed throughout her life. A year after Mark Hacking was convicted of murdering his wife, Lori Hacking, it was revealed that he had been involved in illegal activities while in the Central Utah Correctional Facility in Gunnison, Utah. He was found to be selling personal items, such as autographed memorabilia and other prison-related items, on a website called Murder Auction. Initially, Mark denied the allegations, but later, after an investigation, he agreed to stop his online sales. This revelation caused public outrage and raised new concerns about the integrity of the prison system. Shanti Cooper was a devoted mother to her son, Jackson, 8, who she shared custody of with her ex-husband, Jim Cooper. After separating from Jim in 2013, Shanti was ready to begin dating again. She quickly realized that online dating had become the common way to meet people, so she decided to give it a try by creating a chat account. While exploring different profiles on the site, Shanti connected with a few men, but none impressed her quite like David Trance. David had also recently ended a year-long marriage, was looking for something fresh and exciting. Their relationship deepened through phone calls, text messages, and emails. After several months of getting to know each other, David made a significant decision to move to Orlando, Florida, to be closer to Shanti. Their relationship evolved into something more intimate, while Shanti remained committed to her son. She made sure that her time with David didn't compromise her responsibilities as a mother, always putting Jackson's well-being first and ensuring that everyone understood the importance of a healthy family dynamic. In 2015, Shanti and David relocated to Delaney Park, an upscale suburb close to downtown Orlando. This neighborhood is known for its beautiful environment and family-friendly atmosphere, attracting an affluent community. Delaney Park offers a high-quality lifestyle along with an excellent school system that delivers quality education. Its well-maintained landscapes and access to various amenities make it an attractive choice for families looking for a comfortable and safe home. In here, David bought a house for $600,000 in cash. The home is 4,000 square feet, featuring a pool, a garage, and an apartment above it. This spacious property offered them a comfortable living space with plenty of amenities. Shanti and David were excited to settle into their new house and start a new chapter in their lives. However, they soon noticed that some features of the home did not meet their expectations for the future. While they loved their new house, the upstairs bedrooms felt small and were not very functional. Facing this challenge, David and Shanti began a renovation project to turn their house into their dream home. Shanti, passionate about design and home improvement, agreed to fund the project. They hired a skilled team of contractors who completely dismantled the house to rebuild the upstairs bedrooms and create a new layout that met their vision. During the renovation, the bedrooms were unusable, so Shanti moved into the apartment above the garage. This arrangement allowed her to maintain her daily routine without interruption and provided a dedicated workspace. David, on the other hand, stayed in a makeshift area in the garage, spending quality time with their dogs. David became deeply invested in the restoration. It was no longer just a project but a vital part of his life. He spent every waking moment monitoring the work, making adjustments, ensuring every detail was carefully planned and executed. His entire focus was on the renovation, and the house began to take on a character of its own. In 2018, 3 years after starting the renovation project, there was barely any progress. The inside of the house had been completely stripped down, leaving only the bare structure. Seeking a solution, David reached out to a local home renovator known from the successful A&E reality show, Zombie House Flipping. This show features real estate investors who buy and renovate rundown homes. The show's producer contacted David and Shanti about their home in Delaney Park to see if it could be included in the next season. During the chaos of their home renovations, David and Shanti got married in 2017, which surprised many friends and family. Shanti, who is naturally private, even kept the marriage a secret from her beloved grandmother. By mid-April 2018, the show Zombie House Flipping planned to start filming at David and Shanti's home in May. However, the producer struggled to get them to discuss how the show would proceed. The producer noticed a clear contrast between David's excitement and Shanti's apparent disinterest. David was eager about the flipping series, while Shanti seemed to participate just to support her husband. The tension over their home was evident, as Shanti had invested a lot of money in the renovations, yet her name wasn't even on the trust that owned the house. Although David promised to include Shanti on the trust, he did not follow through, leading to further issues in their relationship. By the end of April 2018, David and Shanti seemed to be doing well. However, on April 24, 2018, at 3:51 p.m., David called 911 in a panic, saying he had found his wife, Shanti, in the bathtub and that she wasn't breathing. During the call, David's screams were audible as he desperately tried to explain the situation. When the police arrived at their home, they discovered Shanti had passed away in the bathtub. The area was secured, and an investigation began, while David was taken to the police station for questioning. David recounted to investigators that the morning had started normally. He said Shanti woke up between 7 and 7:30 a.m. At around 9:30 a.m., he left for a 1-hour walk, leaving Shanti at home. When he returned, he claimed he took measurements for renovations. After that, David stated he left again around noon to take their dogs to an off-leash dog park near the Orlando Executive Airport. He mentioned that he frequently visited this park to let the dogs play and enjoy the open space. He added that he hadn't spoken to Shanti before leaving the house and assumed she was in the garage apartment relaxing. David told the detectives that after returning home from the dog park, he went outside to do yard work. He worked for about 30 minutes before deciding to go inside. Once inside, he heard water coming from the bathroom, which intrigued him, so he went to check it out. As he approached, he noticed that the bathroom door was slightly open. When he pushed it open, he was shocked to find his wife, Shanti, unconscious in the bathtub, with her body partially submerged in water. In a panic, he called 911 to report what he had found. During the interview, David mentioned that Shanti had been excited about their future and the plans they had for their home. They were both looking forward to a happy life together. Although David seemed distraught and his account of finding Shanti appeared credible, the detective had doubts. There were inconsistencies in his story that raised concerns. When police officers arrived at Trant's home after David's call, they noticed that the bathroom was completely dry, which would be unusual if David had genuinely tried to save his wife from a bathtub filled with water. This detail cast doubt on the truth of David's account. The extent of Shanti's injuries contradicted David's explanation of how she fell into the tub. When her body was examined at the crime scene, it was clear she had extensive blood and bruises that couldn't be attributed to just a fall. An autopsy determined that Shanti died from blunt force trauma and strangulation, marking her death as a homicide. These inconsistencies led the detective to question David about the differences in his account. The detective questioned David about the blood found on Shanti's bed. David claimed it was from her menstrual cycle, but the amount discovered was puzzling and raised more doubts. The detectives explored various theories about why David might have killed Shanti. To provoke a response from David, the detective inquired if their ongoing home renovations had anything to do with Shanti's death, but David denied any connection. The detective also asked if Shanti was upset with David because her name was not on the house title. David insisted that Shanti had no problem with that. The detective began to suspect that Shanti's death might be linked to her life insurance policy, which would pay out $250,000 to David. During the interview, detectives asked David whether Shanti's death was an accident related to rough intercourse. He denied harming her in any way. Despite his denial, the detectives believed there was enough evidence to implicate him in Shanti's murder. They thought he had pretended to cry during the 911 call and the interview to divert suspicion. However, before David left the police station, he agreed to take a polygraph test. It was late at night, and the detectives couldn't find a polygrapher to conduct the test right away, so they allowed David to go home. Before he left, he provided DNA samples, nail clippings, and fingerprints to the detectives for analysis and comparison with evidence from the crime scene. The detectives hoped these samples would help them find more evidence linking David to Shanti's murder. Investigators who looked into the crime scene at David and Shanti's home found several notable details. Shanti had one earring still on and another on her nightstand, along with her watch, which was also found on the nightstand at the time of her murder. These details were important to the detectives because they indicated that Shanti might have been getting ready for bed when she was attacked. Additionally, her cell phone was on the nightstand, but there had been no activity on it after 11:30 p.m. on April 23, 2018. The medical examiner's report showed that Shanti had no defensive wounds, suggesting she was caught off guard by the attack. Detectives theorized that Shanti was sitting on the edge of her bed, taking off her jewelry when David attacked her from behind, leading to her death. They believed David then moved her body into the bathtub. Another important discovery was that nothing seemed to have been stolen from the house, leading the detectives to rule out robbery as a motive. However, Shanti's $155,000 engagement ring was missing. As the investigation progressed, detectives found that David's description of his happy marriage with Shanti clashed with what others believed about their relationship. David often hid Jackson's toys and only returned them when Jackson asked for them. The detectives suspected that David was using these tactics to manipulate both Shanti and her son. While searching the garage where David was sleeping, they found an unplugged refrigerator filled with children's toys. This finding reinforced the detectives' belief that David was engaged in manipulative behavior by intermittently hiding Jackson's toys. David appeared to be trying to control the emotions of Shanti and her son. After detectives executed a search warrant at Shanti and David's home, they seized the couple's computers. On Shanti's computer, they discovered notes revealing her dissatisfaction with her marriage to David. In these notes, Shanti described David as cheap, controlling, and narcissistic. She wrote that he never paid when they went out to eat, and on the rare occasions he did, he would make excuses, claiming he forgot his wallet. Shanti shared feelings of sadness and loneliness, expressing her fear. She desired to no longer be part of their life together. She indicated that her mental unhappiness was largely due to her difficult interactions with David. Additionally, the notes showed that living in a house under construction added significant stress to her life. As the detectives investigated Shanti's murder, they uncovered significant information linking David to her death. It was found that Shanti had been hospitalized for 3 days prior to her body being discovered. The detectives learned that she had expressed worries about her eating habits, telling her nanny that she could no longer tolerate spicy foods or drink alcohol. Furthermore, Shanti was experiencing rapid weight loss, which raised more suspicion among the investigators. They were confused by the toxicology tests conducted during her autopsy, which did not reveal any toxic substances in her body. Despite the lack of evidence, they began to suspect that David might have been poisoning Shanti, but they were uncertain about the specific substance responsible, as nothing was detected in the tests. David had been married before he wed Shanti, which prompted detectives to investigate his previous marriage. They found out that his first wife, Carol, suffered from health problems similar to Shanti's. David met Carol on a blind date in 1997, and they married 2 years later. The detectives were concerned about a possible link between Carol's health issues and Shanti's rapid decline in health. Shortly after their marriage, Carol began facing various health challenges, including persistent nausea, fainting spells, severe reactions to spicy foods and alcohol. Some of her close friends suggested to the detectives that David might have started poisoning her after they got married. To learn more about David's past, the detectives traveled from Florida to Minnesota in November 2018 to interview Carol in person. During the recorded interview, Carol described her struggles with chronic pain and immune system problems that remained undiagnosed. She stressed the need to understand her background to grasp the context of her health issues and mentioned that David was the one who cooked their meals during their marriage. The detectives asked Carol about the possibility that David was involved in her health issues, noting it was suspicious that both of his ex-wives faced similar health problems. Carol firmly denied any suggestion that her ex-husband had poisoned her, stating that her health issues continued even after they separated. During the investigation into Shanti's murder, detectives received a call from an employee at Club Orlando, a private men's spa. The club provided amenities like hot tubs, pools, a gym, and dark rooms for intimate activities. To become a member, individuals needed to buy a pass or membership. The employee informed the detectives that David had multiple memberships at Club Orlando and renewed them every 6 months without exception. He claimed to have seen David engaged in intimate activities with other men. Conversations with Shanti's friends revealed that she would never accept her husband having same intimate relationships. This raised the question of whether Shanti had discovered David's actions and threatened to leave him. As the investigation progressed, the detectives thoroughly reviewed all evidence, including information from an employee at Club Orlando. They sought to find out if David's spa membership and the reported intimate activity could shed light on Shanti's death. When the forensic results arrived from the state crime lab, they revealed Shanti's DNA under David's fingernails and his fingerprints were the only ones found in the bathtub. This evidence contradicted David's story, in which he stated that Shanti had accidentally fallen while entering the tub. The detectives had anticipated finding Shanti's fingerprints in the tub as well, but they were absent. On August 29, 2018, David was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and he was denied bail. His friends were shocked by the news, as they found it hard to believe he could be responsible for Shanti's murder. They suspected that the police were looking for an easy resolution and not thoroughly investigating to find the true culprit. However, the detectives carried out a detailed investigation, following all leads regarding Shanti's murder before making the arrest. Additionally, the detectives considered Shanti's ex-husband, Jim Cooper, as a potential suspect due to their rocky divorce, which raised concerns about whether Jim might have harmed Shanti. After interviewing Jim, the detectives were able to eliminate him as a suspect based on his alibi. After David was arrested, police searched his mother's home in Orlando, where he had been living. In a suitcase, they found Shanti's missing engagement ring, which had gone missing the night she was murdered. This discovery strengthened their case against David. On April 18, 2019, almost a year after Shanti's murder, prosecutor Ryan Vecchio was meeting with Orlando Police Inspector Teresa Sprague when David's attorney called. At the time, David was represented by Robert Mandel, who called after receiving Sprague's investigative report. After some deliberation, Robert Mandel informed him that he had hired private investigator Billy Lane from Prison Break Investigations to investigate the case and that he had some papers in his home. ASA Vecchio asked him where these papers came from and Robert informed him that they were taken from the loft apartment David was staying in at the time of the murder and that the police had missed them. He informed him that these papers had been packaged as evidence and kept by Billy Lane at his office in Lakeland and that they planned to test the blood and DNA at some point. They had now kept these papers for 11 months without revealing them. Inside the brown evidence bag, which was marked and labeled, were bed sheets, a fitted sheet, a pillowcase, and a pair of black socks. Police also found a green cord collected from the Trance home that had been found wrapped around a wooden beam from a ladder. Although the strangulation marks were not easily visible, Shanti had an unusual linear cut on the right side of her neck with possible strangulation marks on both sides. Using gloves and magnifying glasses, investigators examined the entire cord for evidence of blood but found nothing that could be seen with the naked eye or under a magnifying glass. In July 2019, a jailhouse informant came forward with important details about a confession from David. The informant said that Shanti had found text messages on David's phone that exposed his intimate relationships with multiple men. This led to a heated argument where Shanti expressed her anger, threatened to expose him, and demanded a divorce. The informant claimed that David admitted to blacking out before he hit Shanti, which ultimately caused her death. Additionally, the informant stated he had known David before being incarcerated and had seen him at Club Orlando. He also revealed that David mentioned cambo, a toxic secretion from an Amazonian giant monkey frog used in controversial treatments. David had allegedly told the informant that this substance could be a poison that kills without leaving traces in a toxicology report. David's trial was postponed due to the global issue, which affected many legal proceedings across the country. As a result, there were significant delays in his case, lasting almost 2 years. Finally, in 2022, the trial began. However, it took an unexpected turn when both the defense and prosecution's medical experts evaluated David, determined that he was not competent to stand trial, concluding that he was experiencing severe symptoms of schizophrenia. In October 2023, after a 6-day trial, a jury found David Trance guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Shanti's son, Jackson, now lives with her ex-husband, Jim Cooper. Shanti, a devoted mother and woman searching for love, stability after a difficult divorce, fell victim to David Trance's manipulative and violent betrayal. Her death at their Delaney Park home, amid a stalled renovation that symbolized the breakdown of their marriage, underscored the dangers of broken promises and hidden motives. David's sentencing in October 2023 brought justice, but it did not erase the pain endured by Shanti's son, Jackson, and her loved ones. In Michigan, there is a small town called Traverse City, with a population of about 15,000. It is famous for the picturesque Lake Michigan, on the shores of which several resorts can be found. In the summer, a large number of tourists are attracted by festivals and water sports events. They come to swim, ride boats, enjoy delicious local food, and appreciate the unique landscapes around Lakes Michigan. In the winter, the area is snowy and quiet, there are few tourists, and life flows very slowly. It was in such a place that 18-year-old Kaylee Bruce lived and worked. She was always a cheerful and bright person. In addition, she was very smart, attractive, and determined. By the 1990s, she was considering pursuing an education. Thanks to her academic success in high school, she managed to gain admission to Northwestern Michigan College without any problems. The educational institution was located in Traverse City. To support herself away from her parents, Kaylee worked as receptionist of a local beach condominium company that rented out apartments, rooms, and houses to visitors. The condominium was situated right on the lake and was very popular during the tourist season. On the evening of Monday, February 16, 1998, Kaylee worked at beach condominiums from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. In February, there were virtually no tourists, only a few locals, so she was almost alone in the building. The night before, while talking to her friend Kim, who also worked at the condominium, she had expressed her eagerness for the start of the season, hoping for more guests and an increase in her salary. That same day, with a little over an hour left before the end of her shift, Kaylee had to do some light cleaning, put everything in the utility room, and then go home. That evening, Kim was not on shift but was passing by the beach condominiums at about 7:30 p.m. She had been driving her friends home after they had spent time together at a restaurant. As Kim drove past beach condominium, she looked toward the office through the window and noticed a light in the area of the administration desk, where Kaylee was preparing to close up. Kim wanted to quickly drop off her friends and then stop by to see Kaylee. However, when Kim returned about 40 minutes later, she saw that the light inside was off and Kaylee was nowhere to be found. Thinking she was late and that her friend had already left. Satisfied that her friend had gone home, she turned around and left. The next morning, on Tuesday, February 17, 1998, at about 7 a.m., the first person to arrive at the beach condominium's office was an air conditioning technician named Zachary Medin. He immediately noticed that the door was unlocked. Although this did not cause him alarm, he calmly walked inside and called out Kaylee's name. Receiving no answer, he saw that no one was at the reception desk where Kaylee should have already been preparing for her workday. She was never late and usually arrived early. All the lights were off, and Zachary walked around the floor. He noticed a glimmer through the crack of a door and decided to investigate further. When he got closer, he saw suspicious red stains near the threshold. It was unclear what it was, but when he opened the door, he realized the horrendous nature of the scene. In horror, Zachary ran away and immediately called emergency services at 911. When the police arrived, Zachary could barely speak, looking emotionally traumatized and barely holding back tears as he described the situation. The scene found in the utility room was soon deemed one of the most horrifying crime scenes in local law enforcement history. In the small room, where household appliances and cleaning supplies were stored, there was blood everywhere, on the walls, even the ceiling. In the middle of the room was the mutilated body of a girl. The victim was Kaylee Bruce, the 18-year-old employee. Next to her body lay all the broken pieces, with shards of plastic and metal covered in dried blood, as well as particles of scalp and hair. Kaylee was found naked, with one of the power cords from an iron wound tightly around her neck, cutting into her skin and crushing her larynx. According to the medical examiner's report, the victim had 19 deep lacerations that cut down to the bone. Her skull was crushed from numerous blows, fractures of the vault and facial bones were found. Severe injuries to her neck and throat were consistent with strangulation, indicating she had been beaten for an extended period with blunt objects on her body, abdomen, chest, and pelvis, leading to numerous internal bleeding. The most horrific detail discovered was a metal pin inserted into her perineum with such force that it damaged the tissues up to the pelvic bone, penetrating several centimeters into it. According to forensic experts, Kaylee remained alive for some time after sustaining this injury until she eventually bled out. Her death was undoubtedly a painful one. The entire small utility room was covered with her blood, and it was smeared over her body as if she had fought back. Despite the small size of the room, it took forensic experts 6 hours to collect dozens of pieces of evidence. They discovered numerous defensive injuries, indicating a brutal struggle, along with signs of disorder around the area. Apparently, Kaylee's resistance only angered her attacker. Footprints and similar traces were found strewn on the floor, suggesting that the attacker had jumped on Kaylee in an attempt to cover this terrible incident. Local reports described the scene, and the first thing that struck the arriving journalist was the amount of blood. He immediately realized they were dealing with one of the most terrible crimes in the town's history. Despite years of experience reporting from dozens of bloody crime scenes, he had never seen such cruelty before. He labeled the criminal a real monster and couldn't comprehend what could drive someone to commit such an atrocity against an innocent 18-year-old girl. Kaylee Bruce died at about 8 p.m. the previous day. It is possible that when Kim was standing outside the office, her friend was already beyond help. She herself miraculously avoided a collision with the killer. Kaylee's family was shocked by such a brutal murder and could not understand who could wish harm to such a sweet girl. Relatives, friends, and acquaintances told detectives that Kaylee was a very nice and kind person. No one had ever heard anyone speak badly of her. It was hard to imagine that someone would have a motive to attack her. Some items were missing from the crime scene, but nothing significant, so the theory of a robbery gone wrong was not considered. Detectives suspected that the perpetrator must have known Kaylee personally, given the brutal nature of the attack. Revenge, hatred, or jealousy seemed likely motives. The attacker was probably observing her and knew her daily routine, allowing him to choose the moment when Kaylee would be most vulnerable. He likely knew when to strike so that no one would be nearby, and she might have trusted him. They decided to search for the criminal among Kaylee's immediate acquaintances and among local residents who might have been in regular contact with her, possibly even living nearby. Unfortunately, there were no CCTV cameras on the premises of the resort or even inside the office, which left them without clues. All the blood at the crime scene was analyzed and confirmed to belong to the victim, but no fingerprints could be found. It was clear that the perpetrator had some criminal experience. He was probably wearing gloves or had carefully erased all traces of his presence. The forensic team collected more than 100 pieces of evidence from the small utility room. The only trace left by the aggressor were boot prints found on the body and the bloody floor. Forensic experts used a special substance that allowed them to obtain a clearer pattern of the shoe's sole along with all the small details. When the police received a full footprint, they assessed the killer's size. He had to be a tall, strong man who wore large shoes. The print had a clear tread, resembled work shoes. Detectives visited local stores to find a similar pair and discovered that the prints matched shoes from a brand called Pajar. When combined with the prints found on Kaylee's body, they turned out to be identical, leading to a person who likely used specific clothing. The young man who worked in the condominium quickly attracted the authorities' attention, Zachary Medden, who discovered the body and reported it to the police. Detectives were alarmed that he had gone to the police to report finding the body. This was a tactic sometimes used by murderers hoping to remove suspicion from themselves and gather information about the progress of the investigation. Zachary was taken to the station for an official interrogation to verify and exclude him from the list of suspects. He was still visibly shaken by what he had seen, struggling to control himself, and appeared sincere. Zachary voluntarily allowed his car to be searched. The investigation had reached a dead end, with no valuable information emerging and all suspects cleared. The excitement in a local community was reaching its peak. It became almost impossible to buy a regular pepper spray for self-defense, as supplies were quickly depleted. The main customers were schoolgirls and female students, afraid to walk alone or go out at night. One of the detectives arrived at the college dormitory where Kaylee studied, and witnesses reported several suspicious young people who had already checked in there. They needed to be checked. In the end, it turned out that they were not involved. The detectives spoke to their friend Kim, who knew Kaylee better than anyone else in the city. She said that shortly before the murder, Kaylee had broken up with her boyfriend, whose name was Dylan. They broke up and started dating again. As far as Kim knew, they had broken up again, but Dylan desperately tried to renew contact with Kaylee. He was obsessively persistent, even manipulative. They talked to him just 2 days after the murder. Dylan worked with heating, air conditioning equipment and serviced the units. They immediately noticed that he had boots of the brand Pilar, similar in size to the footprints found at the crime scene. Dylan had several pairs of the same brand, which were immediately sent to the laboratory for examination. However, no traces of blood could be found on them. Of course, he could have had other similar boots that he got rid of after the attack, but no matter how hard the police tried, they could not find any evidence against Dylan. Additionally, he had a reliable alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. The killer could now be tens or even hundreds of kilometers away from the condominium, but the degree of cruelty suggested great hatred or sadistic inclinations. They were looking for all criminals prone to attacking women who had recently been released from prison and lived in the area. However, all efforts were in vain. During the inspection of the hill, a small metal rod was found. It was a part of a car tire valve. On it, they found Kaylee's blood and several hairs that did not belong to her. One of them had an entire follicle, which allowed them to create a DNA profile of the probable criminal. Hopes for this were still low as the technology at the time was not yet perfect. In any case, this version needed to be checked, and that took time. They decided to use all the meager materials available to them. They organized a press conference and appealed to the public. The key moment on which they focused was the problem of numerous false statements. People contacted the police station, and all leads were checked. One person who contacted them was a local resident who worked as a presenter at a radio station. His name was John Chandler. He immediately noted that his information could help find the criminal. On February 26, 1998, 10 days after the murder of Kaylee and following the press conference, John went to change the tires on his car. Near the resort area, there was an industrial park and a tire factory that he visited. While in the waiting room, he accidentally overheard the manager talking to the rest of the staff, trying to find one of the workers. The employees were discussing that a technician had not shown up for work and had not been seen for several days. They had all seen the press conference, so they suspected something was wrong. There were rumors that the missing man had a very bad character. One colleague mentioned that a day after the murder of Kaylee, he had seen this technician wearing boots of the brand Pajar, which had suspicious dark spots. A day later, he bought himself new shoes and did not wear that pair again. After hearing all of this, John immediately called the police station to request that they check this tip. He felt that this information was very important, and the detectives were convinced of its significance. They went to the tire factory. The manager immediately admitted that John's words were true. Colleagues that morning had discussed one of the employees of the organization, who turned out to be 25-year-old Kevin Holzer, the son of the director of the company. Several employees confirmed that he always wore large-sized Pajar boots while on shift. A few days after the murder, he had a new pair. After examining the area where Kevin usually worked, detectives noticed that small metal rods from tire valves were lying around on the floor. They looked very similar to the evidence from the crime scene. Local workers confirmed that these rods often flew off when changing tires. Now the police were sure that John's statement was leading them in the right direction. Their suspicions only grew stronger when they found out that Kevin had been renting a room in beach condominiums where Kaylee worked for 6 months. He had the opportunity to observe her, calculate her daily routine, and choose the right time when she would be alone. In fact, Kevin spoke with investigators as early as 8 a.m. on February 17, when Kaylee's body was found. He was the only one who did not ask what had happened, which seemed strange. Kevin claimed he had quickly gone to work at the plant. Due to the lengthy process of examining the crime scene and collecting evidence, the detectives did not have the necessary clues when they spoke to Kevin. It became apparent that the criminal could have been in their hands from the very first minutes of the investigation, but he managed to slip away. The new main suspect was now wearing Pajar boots of the same size. It was decided to reanalyze the collected data and follow up on everything the local residents had said. The detectives spoke to one resident of Beach Condominiums. She said that, day of the attack, she returned home from work in the evening at about 10 p.m. The door was open, although she perfectly remembered locking it. It turned out that the master key had disappeared from the reception desk. Suspicions against Kevin were confirmed by Kaylee's friend Kim, who said that he often ran into the office and lingered at the reception desk while Kaylee worked there. Kim believed that Kaylee liked Kevin, so he tried to spend any free minute chatting, even on far-fetched topics. He constantly asked to be let into his apartment with spare keys, which only the condominium administrator had access to. He claimed that he had forgotten or lost his own key. It seemed he was just looking for a reason to get closer to Kaylee. Kevin was tall, athletic, practiced martial arts. He looked like a likely killer, but they failed to find him. He simply ran away. In search of additional information, they went to the tire factory where he worked and checked the guy's biography. They managed to find out that Kevin had problems with the police 5 years before the murder. He had been accused of abuse. In the late hours, Christina was returning home from a bar when a stranger grabbed her and dragged her into an alley, then began to beat her. She sustained very serious injuries and was sure that she was saved by a miracle. Realizing that the criminal wouldn't stop, Christina pretended to be dead and offered no resistance. As soon as she stopped moving, the criminal simply lost interest and left. Apparently, the attacker enjoyed beating and killing women, which was very disturbing. The potential serial killer could be anywhere, and now no one was safe. Trying to understand the moment when Kevin escaped, they realized that he had disappeared from all radar as soon as the press conference was over, which announced the size, brand of the shoes and the tread pattern he had worn before. In order to scare off the probable killer, the police obtained an arrest warrant and went to his apartment, but nothing valuable for their investigation could be found. There were no bloody shoes or clothing, and they even checked the drains in the bathroom, but found no traces of blood. This puzzled the detectives. Around the same time, a friend named Mike contacted the police station. He was very worried and said that he might know where to look for Kaylee's killer. Just before this, he and his friend, Kevin, had spent Friday night at a club. They were drinking and chatting after a new press conference had been held. Detectives got a warrant for Kevin's arrest. During the party, Mike's phone rang. On the other end was another friend who asked where Kevin was, that the main suspect in the murder who was sitting across from Mike. Kevin became noticeably nervous, but Mike managed to say that his girlfriend had called and asked him to come home. Kevin did not suspect anything and said it was time for him to go. Mike walked Kevin to the parking lot, where they said goodbye and went their separate ways. As soon as Kevin disappeared from sight, Mike immediately called the police station, providing a description of Kevin's car and clothing. Mike had said he was heading south but gave no exact directions. Kevin was driving a noticeably gold-colored car, which was quickly tracked down. Detectives arrived at the parking lot, but the car was abandoned, and Kevin was not there. It seemed he had managed to escape punishment again. The police spoke to the guard, who admitted that he had talked with Kevin for a long time before Kevin fled. He reportedly headed to Indiana and planned to use the train. The detectives were following Kevin closely, but he was slightly ahead. During this same period, testing of hair found on the metal part of Kaylee's body was completed. The blood from this small piece belonged to Kaylee Bruce, while the hair was male. Samples were taken from Kevin's apartment, allowing for a comparison of the criminal's DNA profile, which matched completely. They feared that he, like a cornered animal, could start killing again, but they managed to intercept and arrest him. Earlier, during his transfer to Chicago, he had refused to cooperate with the investigation and immediately demanded a lawyer. However, the evidence against him was irrefutable, and the prosecutor considered the trial a mere formality. Detectives discovered that Kevin had moved into the beach condominiums just 6 months before the murder. They suspected that he had not chosen his victim randomly. They believed he probably liked Kaylee and became obsessed with her, eventually stalking her. When he found out that Kaylee would be working and studying in the city, he decided to get as close to her as possible. Naturally, all this could not end well. On June 21, 1999, Kevin Holzer's trial began. He was charged with the murder of Kaylee Bruce. Despite his father's wealth and a smart defense attorney, it seemed even the attorney considered his client guilty and did not even attempt to acquit him. In October 1999, the jury decided that Kevin Holzer was guilty of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In the years since before Kevin was convicted of abuse, there may have been more attacks. Their suspicion was investigated, but it was not possible to confirm these assumptions. Everyone in his circle was in danger. In which, the witness finds her apartment door open when she comes home from work. She is shocked by the lucky coincidence that she was missed by Kevin Holzer. The police believed this was not an accident. He had stolen the master key and used someone else's apartment because he knew that no one would be there for quite a long time. After the massacre, he entered someone else's territory to take a shower and wash away the traces of the attack. Kevin actually had no feelings for Kaylee except cruelty. Any girl could have been in her place. He intentionally found excuses to approach her, chat with her, and ask for her keys because he wanted to learn how to get them. He carefully calculated Kaylee's schedule as soon as she first talked to him. The lives of Traverse City residents were divided into before and after the murder of Kaylee Bruce. This massacre was so cruel and senseless that the crime is still imprinted in the memory of many townspeople. Joshua Powell was born on January 20, 1976, in Puyallup, Washington, to Stephen and Terica Powell. He had 4 siblings, Michael, John, Jennifer, and Alina. However, life in the Powell family was far from normal. Their father, Stephen, was controlling and inappropriate, fostering a toxic atmosphere for his children. He shared adult material with his sons and set no boundaries, exposing them to adult content that influenced their behavior. As a teenager, Joshua acted out violently. He once killed his sister's pet gerbil in a fit of anger. He also threatened his mother with a knife during an argument, and when he felt desperate, he threatened to harm himself. In 2000, Joshua met Susan Cox at a church dinner. She was kind, hardworking, and full of life, and they got married within a year. Unbeknownst to Susan, her marriage would encounter serious challenges. Initially, they lived with Joshua's father, Stephen, in Washington, and that was when things became really disturbing. Stephen began to obsess over Susan. He watched her with a camera, used a small mirror to look into the bathroom, stole her underwear from the washing machine, read her diary, and posted love songs online under a pseudonym. Finally, one day, he confessed his feelings to Susan. This conversation, which included Susan's panicked rejection, was accidentally recorded on his own camera. It became the final straw. Joshua and Susan decided to pack up and move to Utah, hoping to forget about Stephen. For a while, life seemed to stabilize for Joshua and Susan, who had 2 sons named Charlie and Braden. They relocated to West Valley City, Utah, in search of a fresh start. However, Susan felt increasingly suffocated in her marriage. Her friends noticed her unhappiness and learned that Joshua hardly showed her any affection, creating a sense of distance between them. By the summer of 2008, their situation had deteriorated significantly. Joshua and Susan argued constantly, even in front of their children. Joshua had become extremely controlling, making all the decisions and leaving Susan feeling trapped. Their marriage was not just struggling, it was falling apart. He took complete control of their finances, forcing Susan to rely on him for even minor expenses. He reduced their grocery budget, refused to buy her new clothes, and required her to justify every dollar she spent. While he guarded their bank accounts, he had no issue spending money on himself, wasting thousands while Susan struggled to afford basic necessities. The issue extended to their vehicles as well. Although they owned 2 cars, Joshua claimed the family car as his own. Instead of allowing Susan to drive to work, he made her ride a bike, regardless of the weather or her fatigue. Moreover, he started to distance himself from their shared faith. Although they had been active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Joshua began refusing to attend services with Susan and their sons. He mocked her beliefs, made excuses to avoid church, and discouraged her involvement. The most painful betrayal came when Joshua refused to sever ties with his father, Stephen, despite Susan's insistence that he was dangerous and unwelcome in their lives. Joshua ignored her concerns, continued to communicate with his father, and allowed their young children to maintain contact with him. By 2007, Joshua had accumulated over $200,000 in debt, adding to their marital strain as Susan recognized that their situation was worsening. In response, she began documenting everything. In 2008, Susan created a video documenting the damage in her home, which she attributed to Joshua. That same year, she wrote a secret will ominously stating that if she were to die, it might not be an accident, even if it appeared to be one. Just a year later, she disappeared without a trace. On December 6, 2009, everything seemed normal. That morning, Susan, Charlie, and Braden went to church as usual. Susan interacted with friends and tended to her boys, and nothing appeared out of the ordinary. After church, a neighbor visited the family and spent some time with them before leaving. No one could have predicted that this would be the last time anyone would see Susan. The following morning, December 7th, something felt off. Susan didn't show up for work and hadn't called in sick or requested a day off. At the same time, the boys' nanny noticed that Joshua hadn't dropped them off, which was unusual for him. Concerned, she tried to contact the family, but no one answered. As hours went by without any word from Susan or Joshua, worry turned to fear. Joshua's mother, Terica, and his sister, Jennifer, learned about the situation and rushed to the house. When they arrived, they found the doors locked, the curtains drawn, and no one inside. The unsettling silence heightened their anxiety. They knocked and called out, but received no response. In a state of panic, they called the police. Officers arrived and forced entry into the home, fearing that the family might have been victims of carbon monoxide poisoning or faced another emergency. What the officers discovered inside the house was deeply concerning. Although the house was empty, something felt wrong. Susan's purse, wallet, and identification were still there, untouched. Her cell phone was later found in the family's only car, a Chrysler Town and Country minivan that Joshua had been using. It was turned off. There were no signs of a struggle, but one detail stood out. 2 box fans were set up in the living room, blowing air directly onto a damp spot on the couch. This unusual detail felt unsettling. Hours later, around 5 p.m., Joshua returned home with his sons, Charlie and Braden. The police quickly brought him in for questioning. His explanation was strange. He claimed that after midnight on December 7th, he took his 2 young sons, ages 4 and 2, on a spontaneous camping trip to the Pony Express Trail in western Utah, a remote area characterized by snow and freezing temperatures. He mentioned that Susan stayed home to sleep. His story raised many questions. Who would take toddlers on an impromptu camping trip in sub-freezing weather in the middle of the night, especially when they had work and daycare to prepare for in just a few hours? Police found it suspicious that Joshua had not notified his boss about not coming to work that day. When asked why, he gave a puzzling answer. He claimed he had lost track of the days and thought it was Sunday instead of Monday. Investigators aimed to confirm his story by sending a team to the area where he claimed to have camped. However, they found no evidence to support his claim, no tire tracks in the snow, no footprints, no fire pit, nothing. It was as if he had never gone on that trip. Things took an even stranger turn. On December 8th, after a second police interview, Joshua suddenly rented a car from Salt Lake City International Airport and then disappeared for nearly 18 hours. His whereabouts during that time remain unknown. When he finally reappeared, he called his mother from Interstate 84 in Tremonton, Utah, sounding disoriented and giving vague answers about his location. Later, He told his sister Jennifer that he had been driving around the city aimlessly, randomly getting on and off different freeways. When police examined the rental car, they found that he had added 87 miles to the odometer. Where did he go? What was he doing? No one knows, but it was becoming increasingly evident that Joshua was concealing something. 2 days after Susan went missing, the police conducted another search of her home. This time, they found something concerning on the floor, traces of Susan's blood. While it wasn't a large amount, it was enough to raise serious questions. Inside the house, they also discovered life insurance policies totaling $1.5 million and a handwritten letter from Susan. In the letter, she expressed her growing fear for her life and mentioned being terrified of Joshua. Years later, DNA tests confirmed that one blood sample belonged to Susan, while another matched an unknown male, whose identity remains unknown. As the police investigated Joshua's actions following Susan's disappearance, his behavior appeared increasingly suspicious. He emptied her retirement accounts, canceled her chiropractic appointments, and withdrew his sons from daycare, all within days of her vanishing. It seemed he was trying to erase her from their lives. Additionally, Joshua had previously talked to co-workers about how to dispose of a body in an abandoned mine shaft. At the time, people dismissed it as a strange comment, but now, it seemed more significant. As investigators worked to understand what happened to Susan, they questioned the only other witnesses present with Joshua that night, his sons. 4-year-old Charlie was interviewed, and surprisingly, he confirmed that the camping trip took place. However, his account included a significant twist. He claimed that their mother was with them. According to Charlie, Susan was in the car that night but never returned home. Weeks later, a teacher overheard Charlie make a chilling remark, stating that his mother was dead, without any details or explanations, suggesting he had come to accept this reality. Additionally, Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, reported a troubling incident. At daycare, Charlie's younger brother, Braden, drew a picture of a van. When asked about it, Braden pointed to the back of the van and said, "Mommy was in the trunk." This raised further suspicions for the police, who were becoming increasingly convinced that Joshua was aware of what had happened to Susan. They intended to bring Joshua in for further questioning and requested all footage of his interviews with local news outlets. However, Joshua showed no willingness to cooperate. On December 14th, he obtained legal representation. In the following days, he became more distant and less responsive to the authorities. Just before Christmas, he gathered his sons and left Utah, returning to Puyallup, Washington, to live with his father, Stephen Powell. By December 24th, police identified him as a person of interest in the case. Sadly, the situation was far from resolved. In 2010, Joshua moved into his father's house in Puyallup, bringing his 2 young sons, Charlie and Braden. Joshua made it clear he wasn't returning to Utah, announcing plans to rent out their home in West Valley City. Some reports indicated he left due to losing his job, but those who knew him felt he was fleeing from something. Shortly after settling in Washington, a website called SusanPowell.org emerged. It claimed to be the official site for Susan Powell, but instead of helping to find her, it focused on defending Joshua. The site accused Susan's family, including her sister Jennifer Graves, and even the LDS Church of conducting a smear campaign against him. Some posts went so far as to suggest that Susan had fled to Brazil with another missing person, journalist Stephen Kocher, a completely unfounded theory. It didn't take long for people to suspect that Joshua and his father, Stephen, were behind the website. Then, by late 2010, the Powells made a startling claim. They suggested that Susan had been mentally ill and had intentionally abandoned her family. This seemed like a desperate attempt to change the narrative, but Susan's parents quickly rebutted it. There was no evidence to support the idea that Susan left on her own or that she was mentally unstable. While Joshua tried to portray himself as the victim, the police began focusing on his father, Stephen. A family friend revealed that Stephen had been obsessed with Susan for years. When investigators examined Stephen's computers, they discovered 4,500 images of Susan, many taken without her consent. These were not just ordinary photographs, They included disturbing close-ups of her body. Police began investigating Joshua's brother, Michael Powell, after he displayed suspicious behavior. Shortly after Susan went missing, he sold his broken Ford Taurus to a junkyard in Pendleton, Oregon. This raised eyebrows, especially when he later requested satellite images of the lot, seemingly to monitor the car. When authorities tracked it down, they used cadaver dogs, which indicated that human remains had once been in the trunk. Unfortunately, DNA tests did not yield conclusive results, leaving a key question in the case unanswered. In September 2011, police thought they had a significant lead. While searching Topaz Mountain in Utah, a location frequently visited by Joshua, they discovered what looked like a grave site. The ground appeared to have been recently disturbed and showed signs of digging. Investigators spent several days examining the area, but ultimately found no remains. Meanwhile, tensions between the Joshua families and the Susan families escalated. After police searched Stephen's home, both he and Joshua took to the media to advocate for their side of the story. Stephen claimed that he and Susan were developing a romantic relationship before her disappearance, using old journal entries from her teenage years to argue that she had always been unstable. A judge did not accept this narrative. He ruled that Stephen and Joshua could not publish any of Susan's personal writings and ordered them to return or destroy any journals they had already made public. Then the situation escalated. On September 22, the police arrested Stephen on charges of voyeurism and child abuse. Investigators found secretly recorded videos in his home featuring young girls, adult women, and, most alarmingly, Susan. It was apparent that Stephen posed a serious danger, and authorities began to suspect that Joshua might not be innocent either. John Long, Washington's Assistant Attorney General, announced that Joshua was now part of the investigation. The day after Stephen's arrest, Susan's father, Chuck Cox, filed for custody of his grandchildren, Charlie and Braden. Initially, the court granted him only temporary custody, allowing Joshua the opportunity to regain custody if he moved out of Stephen's home. Joshua rented a house in South Hill, Washington, presenting it as if he were complying with the order. However, authorities later claimed he never actually lived there. By this time, Joshua's sister, Jennifer, publicly expressed her belief that he was involved in Susan's disappearance. As the custody battle escalated, the court ordered Joshua to undergo psychological evaluations. A forensic psychologist, James Manley, evaluated Joshua and discovered concerning patterns. Joshua denied having any normal human flaws or weaknesses and displayed highly controlling behavior toward his sons. He also exhibited signs of deep paranoia, frequently blaming the police and media for his difficulties. Despite these findings, there was no direct evidence of abuse. Therefore, Manley allowed Joshua to visit his sons several times a week under the supervision of a social worker. However, in January 2012, everything changed. When examining computers seized from Joshua's home, police found about 400 images of child abuse, bestiality, and incest. The images had been cached from a previous owner, but Joshua had viewed them. Although they weren't illegal, the psychologist handling his case was deeply concerned. Joshua was ordered to undergo a full psychological evaluation and a polygraph test. As the pressure mounts, Joshua becomes desperate and is about to commit a horrific act that no one could have imagined. On February 5, 2012, social worker Elizabeth Griffin Hall pulled up to Joshua's house in South Hill, Washington, for what was supposed to be a routine supervised visit between him and his two young boys, Charlie and Braden. The court had ordered these visits to be monitored for the children's safety, so Hall was there to ensure everything went smoothly. However, the moment she arrived, something felt off. As soon as the boys reached the front door, Joshua yanked them inside and slammed it shut right in Hall's face. She barely had time to react before she heard the deadbolt click. She pounded on the door, shouting for him to open it, but he didn't respond. Panicked, she pulled out her phone and called 911. Her voice shook as she told the dispatcher what had just happened, that she was supposed to be supervising the visit, that Joshua had locked her out, and that she feared for the boys' safety. She begged them to send help quickly. Immediately afterwards, a terrible explosion occurred, shaking the house. The force of the explosion propelled Hall backward. Within seconds, flames erupted, engulfing the home in thick black smoke. The intense heat scorched the air around her, leaving her immobilized by fear. Neighbors rushed over, some shouting and others already calling emergency services, but it was too late. The fire spread rapidly, and there was no chance for anyone inside to escape alive. Investigators later confirmed their initial suspicions. Joshua had planned this act. It wasn't an accident or a tragic gas leak. He had doused the house in gasoline, turning it into a death trap. Officially, Charlie and Braden died from carbon monoxide poisoning, but the reality was more horrific. Joshua had attacked them with a hatchet before starting the fire. The day before the tragedy, he emptied his bank account, donated the boys' toys to charity, and sent cold, emotionless goodbye emails to family and friends. Charlie and Braden were buried beside their mother, whom they would never see again, but their family's struggle continued. A year after Joshua took the lives of his two young sons and himself, his brother Michael tragically followed suit. On February 11, 2013, he ended his own life. His ending his own life sparked even more suspicion. In 2012, police questioned him several times about his abandoned Ford Taurus, which was found at a wrecking yard in Oregon. When asked why he left it there, he was vague and did not provide clear answers. Investigators later indicated they believed both Joshua and Michael were involved in Susan's murder. Despite extensive searching, Susan's case remained unsolved and hopeless. By May 21, 2013, the West Valley City Police officially closed the investigation into her disappearance. In the same year, James Manley, the psychologist who assessed Joshua for the state of Washington, acknowledged that he had always suspected Joshua was connected to Susan's disappearance. However, he did not include these suspicions in his official report, as his role was to evaluate Joshua's parenting, not to investigate a crime. The legal dispute over Susan's estate continued for years. In March 2015, Susan's father, Chuck Cox, finally prevailed in a lengthy legal battle against Terica and Alina Powell, who had attempted to declare Susan legally dead in order to collect life insurance. As a result, Chuck gained full control of the estate. In 2019, a surprising revelation came to light. KSL, a radio station in Salt Lake City, reported on its detailed podcast about Susan's case, called Cold, that disturbing child abuse material found by West Valley City Police, which contributed to Joshua losing custody of his sons, did not actually belong to him. In fact, it wasn't even found on his computer. The explicit images were located on a second-hand computer that Susan had bought from fellow members of her LDS church. The previous owners had viewed the content, but by the time this information surfaced, it was too late to rectify the situation. The damage had already been done. In early 2022, there was one final attempt to locate Susan's remains. A team led by Dave Sparks, known from the TV show Diesel Brothers, searched a remote mine shaft in the Utah desert in hopes of bringing Susan home. They discovered rib bones, what looked like human vertebrae, and pieces of clothing, indicating that someone had died there. The remains were sent for DNA testing, but once again, there was no success. The bones did not belong to Susan, and they were not even human. A pair of pants found with the remains tested positive for male DNA, raising another question: to whom did they belong? More importantly, will Susan Powell ever be found? Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Malt. While at university, Karen met Nigel Malt, a man with ambitious career goals. Their relationship started off well and seemed promising for starting a family. Although Karen's mother was concerned about Nigel's rude behavior, she chose to ignore this advice. They later married and had a daughter, Lauren Malt, who was born on April 8, 2002. Initially, Karen and Nigel's life together appeared happy, and they seemed to have a bright future ahead of them. However, over time, Nigel began to manipulate Karen. He used typical abuser tactics, suppressing her emotions with lies and appealing to her feelings of pity, which made her dependent on him. She was financially dependent on her husband and was unable to continue her studies due to pregnancy, making it difficult for her to find a job later on. Nigel had a long history of addiction to alcohol and prohibited substances. By this time, he was unable to function without these substances, which led to serious consequences for his life and family. Nigel had been a kind person before, but as his addiction worsened, his personality changed dramatically. He became aggressive and cruel toward Karen. Nigel's violent outbursts increased, and he began to take his anger out on Karen, eventually leading to physical abuse. Things worsened when their daughter, Lauren, observed the abuse. Despite this, Karen fought hard to save the relationship. By the time she could no longer take it, they had 4 children together. The thought of divorce was terrifying, especially with a long legal battle ahead. Their joint assets were minimal, and the prospect of being a single mother to 4 children worried Karen. She was particularly stressed about child support and custody, fearing that her husband Nigel might try to gain custody of the children just to hurt her. At this time, everyone was tired of Nigel's irresponsible behavior. He used to earn money and support his family, but now he had started to waste almost all of his income on alcohol and prohibited substances. Karen was very concerned about the impact this had on their children, who were growing up in fear. Their father drank every day and often abused their mother in front of them. This situation could not go on forever, but Karen was patient for a long time. Despite her family and friends urging her to leave him, she stayed for the sake of her children. It became clear that Nigel could not change. Karen decided to talk to Nigel about getting a divorce, which led to another angry outburst from him. He refused to pay alimony, making his stance clear to her. However, she and the children no longer wanted to live with someone so dangerous. The conversation ended in another conflict, filled with threats, which only strengthened Karen's resolve to leave her unfit husband as soon as possible. In March 2021, Karen reported Nigel's violent behavior to the police after a violent fight broke out while he was drunk. Karen later withdrew her testimony to spare him trouble, hoping that he would cooperate and consider a peaceful divorce. However, his failure to take responsibility made the situation worse. In April, Karen experienced an even more severe beating, which left her terrified for her life and concerned for her children. Realizing she needed to take action to end the abuse, she contacted the police again to report the domestic violence. Taking advantage of the moment Nigel was taken to the police station, she decided to escape with her children to her mother's house. However, he posted bail and was released while awaiting further legal action. He was placed under house arrest and tried to manipulate her emotions by claiming he would end his life. But this no longer affected Karen. She was determined to act strongly and see things through to the end. To show Nigel that she was serious, she attempted to obtain a restraining order, but unfortunately, this effort failed. During this time, financial troubles worsened, leading Nigel to drink more heavily and become increasingly aggressive, cruel. He could not control his anger, treating not only his wife poorly, but also Lauren and their sons. Finally, Nigel was found guilty of domestic violence and received a suspended sentence. He was prohibited from contacting Karen and the children. During this time, he lost everything. Karen left him and refused to listen to any excuses or promises. He also lost touch with his children, who were no longer interested in seeing him because of his unpredictable and cruel behavior. Alcohol, which he had developed a daily habit of consuming, was banned, and he was unable to control his addiction. It appeared he was using alcohol as a way to cope with the hope of reconciling with his wife. However, Karen was firm in her decision and demanded a divorce. All of this has left Nigel feeling demotivated. Despite his promises to stop using prohibited substances, his condition worsened. He claimed this was due to his need to cope with his problems. The issue of alimony needed to be addressed, as it was nearly impossible for Karen to support 4 children alone. Karen found a job as a salesperson, but her income was insufficient. To help, their daughter Lauren took on several part-time jobs. Meanwhile, Karen's lawyer reassured her that she didn't need to worry about custody. Nigel was a severe alcoholic, and due to allegations of violence, he could be completely barred from seeing the children. At this time, Lauren's relationship with her father, Nigel, was strained, so she only wanted to communicate with her mother. During this time, Karen and her children lived in her grandmother's house in a small village called West Winch in Norfolk County, UK. Lauren turned 19 during this time and was dating a guy named Arthur. On Sunday, January 23, 2022, Arthur took Lauren to work at the store where she was employed as a salesperson. Throughout the day, Nigel called his daughter, Lauren, multiple times. It was unclear what he wanted, but she suspected he was in an unstable state. To avoid distractions at work, she chose not to engage in any conversations. After a long and tiring shift, Lauren returned home, hoping to unwind with her boyfriend before starting her next shift the following day. She was working hard, including overtime, to save money for her education. That evening, Nigel began calling again. It was clear he was not sober. Lauren decided to ignore his calls, hoping he would calm down. However, he was relentless, calling 19 times between 6:25 p.m. and 6:52 p.m. Despite the constant ringing, Lauren remained silent. Unfortunately, ignoring Nigel was no longer an option. He lived just 10 minutes away, making it easy for him to show up unannounced. At around 7:01 p.m., Nigel called Lauren, and she answered out of fear that not responding would escalate things further. Their conversation was brief and quickly turned hostile, filled with insults and threats. Lauren tried to calm her father, but her efforts only seemed to infuriate him more. According to Arthur, Nigel arrived at Lauren's house at 7:21 p.m. while Karen was at work. He was clearly drunk and acted aggressively. Lauren stepped outside, attempting to de-escalate the situation, but he responded with insults and tried to provoke a fight. He swung the crowbar and nearly hit her several times. After several attempts to grab her, he threatened to attack Arthur, who had been with her. Eventually, Lauren prompted Nigel to leave, expressing her desire to avoid further communication with him in that state. Lauren attempted to get Nigel into the car to make him leave, but unexpectedly, he began screaming again. He jumped into his car, and just as Lauren was behind it, he suddenly reversed and ran over his own daughter. He paused for a few seconds, staring at her through the windshield. She was seriously injured, bleeding and screaming for help, but he did nothing. He didn't even get out of the car or call for an ambulance. Instead, he pressed the gas pedal and ran over Lauren a second time. It all happened so fast that Arthur couldn't react in time to assist her. The commotion drew the attention of neighbors, who called the police. One man rushed into the street, trying to stop Nigel, the crazed driver. Nigel saw Lauren lying on the ground, moaning in pain with serious injuries, but she was still alive. The neighbor realized that calling an ambulance was urgent, as Lauren had sustained injuries that would prevent her from being moved. However, Nigel was indifferent and insisted that everything was fine, claiming Lauren only had a few scratches. He pushed away the neighbor and Arthur, who were shouting at him to stop and call for help. Instead of calling emergency services, Nigel picked up Lauren and placed her in the passenger seat of his car. As he did this, Lauren moaned in pain, especially when Nigel tried to push her into the car. She was unable to sit up straight or maintain her balance due to her injuries, which likely included fractures. Nigel didn't even buckle her seatbelt, causing her to roll onto the floor in front of the passenger seat. While driving, he called his ex-wife, Karen, and began to tell a confusing story about an incident in which he accidentally injured Lauren. He was drunk, and his explanation was muddled. Karen didn't fully understand what was happening, but decided to wait for Nigel to arrive at her workplace. Nigel insists that Lauren is not seriously injured and wants to inform Karen so that Karen can take her to the hospital. He admitted that he couldn't do it himself because he had been drinking and was afraid of losing his driver's license. He drove directly to the parking lot in front of the store where Karen worked. Upon seeing Lauren's condition, Karen realized that Nigel had downplayed the severity of the situation. Lauren was in critical condition, and Karen struggled to lift her from the floor into a seat. During this time, Nigel merely watched in silence. Lauren showed no response. It appeared she could lose consciousness from the pain. Eventually, Karen called for an ambulance. Lauren was taken to the hospital, where doctors quickly realized her injuries were severe and could only be treated at a specialized medical center. They did everything possible to save her life. Unfortunately, a few minutes after she was on the operating table, her heart stopped beating. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the scene where Lauren was stabbed. There, they met Arthur and the neighbors, who witnessed the horrific incident. Bloody tire marks were visible on the driveway, evidence left by Nigel. Unlike many other crimes, there was enough evidence to bring immediate charges. The medical examiner evaluated the injuries of Lauren, who was the victim of a double car crash. She suffered a broken back, which caused her to lose her balance and fall onto the car floor. Her rib cage was severely damaged, multiple ribs were broken, her lungs were torn, and she experienced significant internal bleeding. The traumatic injuries to her chest and abdomen were fatal, as many of her internal organs were crushed or harmed by bone fragments. It was clear that she had been run over by a car, and she might have survived the first collision. After the second collision, she might have had a chance of survival if she had not been pushed into the car by Nigel and fallen, and if paramedics had been called immediately. Unfortunately, her fall to the floor of the car made her condition worse, and the delay ultimately claimed her life. Nigel Malt was quickly apprehended. It was discovered that he was highly intoxicated, with a blood alcohol level more than twice the legal limit for driving. Karen believed his aggressive behavior was solely due to alcohol or prohibited substance use. After his arrest, Nigel refused to cooperate with authorities. Nigel provided basic details about his name and address to the police, but refused to discuss the incident. During the preliminary hearing, he denied any wrongdoing, despite clear evidence against him. He explained that he went to see Lauren that evening after she didn't answer his calls, and then spoke to him rudely. He tried to talk to her, but she was unresponsive because he was leaving and planned to talk later. As he backed his car out, he felt a slight thump, but assumed he had hit a box or a rock that he hadn't seen in the rearview mirror. He had no clue that he had run over his own daughter. When he backed up to check what he had hit, he accidentally ran over her again. This is clearly a dishonest excuse from a coward who dares not admit his guilt. The detectives observed how unemotional he was when discussing his daughter's death, and it seemed to have no effect on him. In conversations about his family, he often spoke of Karen and Lauren with disdain. This situation was completely baffling. Nigel's wife, Karen, was a good woman devoted to her family. Lauren grew up to be just like her mother, a decent person. Despite the difficult home life caused by Nigel, she avoided alcohol and other harmful substances. Instead, she focused on her education, career, and improving her life. The neighbor and Lauren's boyfriend, Arthur, contradicted Nigel's assertion that the incident was accidental. They claimed that after Nigel ran over her while reversing, he paused for a few seconds, shining his headlights on her. Nigel could not have missed her at that moment. Then, he intentionally ran over her a second time. This could not have been an accident. Even if he didn't see her the first time, She was clearly in his line of sight the second time. The neighbor claimed that there was a conflict between Nigel and Lauren that evening. He described Nigel as aggressive and unkind. Even when Nigel hit Lauren with his car, he showed anger on his face and did not stop. The neighbor believed that the violence started because Lauren was simply asking him to leave. The police have obtained new evidence. While the neighbor attempted to talk to Nigel, several local residents recorded the incident with their cameras and phones from their windows. This footage was later presented in court. It clearly showed Nigel intentionally running over Lauren, and the prosecutor's office argued that the initial incident was also not an accident. Even the defense lawyer acknowledged that what happened could hardly be seen as a mere coincidence. The defense attorney focused on arguing that the murder was unintentional, but this argument lacked credibility. However, the bloody tire tracks and Nigel's tire tracks were a perfect match. Given the undeniable evidence, Nigel Malt was found guilty. In September 2022, a hearing was held where the sentence was announced. Nigel Malt was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 18 years before he could apply for parole. The court noted that Karen's claims of domestic violence were considered when determining the sentence. Karen's family made it clear that they would remain involved. Karen stated in a media interview that she would attend every parole hearing to ensure that Nigel did not get released. At the sentencing hearing, Nigel relied on crutches for support throughout the proceedings. He maintained his innocence, claiming the incident was an accident. Many believed he was trying to gain sympathy from the court by portraying himself as a victim, a tactic he often used with Karen. Others saw this as just punishment for a man who had killed a child. Karen had decided to proceed with the divorce, feeling ashamed to be associated with a man who killed his own daughter in a drunken rage. He had used his car as a weapon, running over her twice and leaving her no chance of survival. Given these circumstances, Karen felt the sentence was too lenient and believed Nigel should never be released. Karen argued that he was a dangerous and cruel man who had completely lost control due to excessive drinking and the use of prohibited substances. She warned that if he were released, he would continue to kill. It was only a matter of time. Notably, Nigel's sons have repeatedly stated that they would only feel safe if their father remained in prison for life. The case has created great public outrage, leading to much discussion about protecting children and spouses from domestic abusers. Activists are calling for harsher penalties for individuals like Nigel, including life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, no substantial changes have been made so far. Timothy Wiltsey was born on August 6, 1985. His family called him Timmy. By 1991, when he was 5 years old, he lived with his mother, Michelle Ludzinski, in the small town of South Amboy, New Jersey. On Memorial Day weekend, which also marked the end of the school year, Timothy and Michelle went to a carnival at an amusement park in the nearby town of Sayreville. On May 25, 1991, Michelle's 14-year-old niece, Jennifer Blair Dilcher, and her mother came to visit. However, their plans changed, and they could not go to the carnival together. Michelle and Timothy arrived at the park around 7 p.m. Michelle bought several tickets for the rides, and then they walked over to a soda machine. While she turned away for a few minutes to pay for the drinks, Timothy disappeared. Jennifer was supposed to be picked up by her mother's friend, who was her babysitter. They arrived 15 minutes late and found Michelle frantically looking for her son. As soon as she saw Jennifer and the nanny, Michelle explained that she had been momentarily distracted. Now her son was missing. The group decided to split up and search for him. Jennifer and her nanny quickly found a police officer in the park and asked for assistance. Meanwhile, Michelle spoke to the officer, describing her son Timothy as wearing a tank top, shorts, and sneakers with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on them. She filed a report about Timothy's disappearance, prompting the officer to start searching the park. The celebration was paused, and the area was cordoned off for a thorough investigation. That evening, The search area widened to include nearby forests and beyond. Finding Timothy quickly was proving difficult. Sadly, there were no surveillance cameras in the area at the time. The following day, multiple search teams were sent out. The local authorities provided a helicopter and a team of divers to check 2 nearby ponds. Hundreds of volunteers joined the search and rescue efforts, covering a large area. Many law enforcement officers worked alongside them in the park and its surroundings over the next few days, but they were unable to locate Timothy. During this difficult time, Michelle's family supported her. According to her father and sister, she appeared to be a devastated mother. Michelle never imagined that such a tragedy could happen to her. Just a few weeks earlier, she had bought a graduation dress for her child's kindergarten ceremony. They were getting ready for the celebration and planning a trip to visit Michelle's sister in Florida for the holidays. Everything seemed normal. Despite facing financial challenges, Michelle did not want to rely solely on government assistance. She continued to work and received some support from her family. George Wiltsey, the boy's father, had no relationship with him. Michelle met George after she dropped out of school. She initially lived with her parents on Long Island before choosing to start a family with him. They dated for about 3 years and then moved to New Jersey. While in New Jersey, Michelle became pregnant and gave birth to Timothy in 1985, with George being 18 and Michelle 17 at the time. They decided to expand their family, but eventually moved to George's home state of Iowa. Unfortunately, they struggled to create a stable life together. 6 months after the move, Michelle returned to New Jersey, first living with her sister and her husband. Later, she moved into a rented apartment with Timothy and cut all ties with George. Michelle didn't reveal why she and George broke up, but she prevented him from seeing their son afterward. George didn't provide child support, and Michelle rejected his assistance. She even sent back all the items he mailed for their son. People who knew them suspected that banned substance use might have played a role in their breakup, and George had physically assaulted Michelle at least once. George, however, argued that Michelle longed for New Jersey and her family, which led her to distance herself from him. In the spring of 1991, Michelle, a 23-year-old single mother, was raising her 5-year-old son on her own. She was the only provider for both of them and was determined to create a stable life, which meant she often had to switch jobs. However, her limited education made it difficult to maintain consistent employment. Over time, she worked as a legal assistant, a secretary, and in various retail positions, sometimes juggling 2 jobs at once. Her father helped by sending her money for housing, which was crucial for their survival. Managing everything while caring for a young child was challenging. Michelle frequently needed assistance from family and friends to look after her son while she worked. When no one could help, she would bring him along, which often made her late for work. This tardiness harmed her reputation and led to her being fired from jobs. In January 1990, her support network took a hit when her sister and brother-in-law, who had been a key source of help, moved to Florida. Feeling overwhelmed and without adequate support, Michelle made the difficult decision to send her son to live with her brother in Minnesota for 2 months. This would allow her to save money for his education. Many people who knew Michelle described her as a dedicated mother who devoted all her free time to her son, ensuring he had everything he needed. They often went hiking together and worked on school preparations at home. However, after her son went missing, some critics emerged. They pointed out that her son, Tim, created tension in her romantic relationships. Many of the men she dated were reluctant to take on the responsibility of raising another person's child, which often led to the end of their relationships with her. In her frustration, Michelle started to see her son as a burden. One of her former partners described her as an immature mother who acted more like Timothy's older sister than a parent, saying she often neglected the child's needs. One day, Timothy entered a neighbor's yard and was bitten by the neighbor's dog, requiring 72 stitches on his face. This happened despite the neighbor warning Michelle to supervise her son to keep him off his property. A friend of Timothy's noted that Timothy was very afraid of Michelle's last boyfriend, Fred Bruno. Even though Fred left a negative impression on many, Michelle did not take her son's fears seriously. The friend even speculated that Fred might be involved in Timothy's disappearance. Initially, Timothy's biological father was considered a primary suspect. He had been estranged from Michelle and was prohibited from contacting his son, which gave him a potential motive for kidnapping Tim. Authorities thoroughly searched the father's home but found no evidence of Tim. He passed a polygraph test and had a strong alibi. Fred Bruno was also investigated but was quickly ruled out as a suspect. When the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, became involved in the search for Tim, they began to question Michelle Ludzinski's true identity. Her behavior appeared odd. She did not seem genuinely worried about her son's disappearance. Michelle was experiencing financial issues and difficulties. For many young single mothers, this ongoing stress can sometimes lead to thoughts of abandoning their child, whom they may view as a major source of their problems. Some mothers choose to place their children with relatives, some give up their parental rights, and tragically, some even harm their children. As a result, Michelle quickly became a primary suspect in the case of her son's disappearance or potential murder. Authorities were eager to find out what she had done to him. Just days after Timothy went missing, she took a lie detector test but failed. A week later, she took another test and failed again. The expert who conducted the tests noted that Michelle showed significant emotional fluctuations, avoided eye contact, and seemed more focused on her own situation than on her child's well-being. Several clear signs of deception were observed, and investigators later found out that Michelle had lied to her close friends, claiming she had passed the lie detector test. The situation attracted a lot of public attention. Family members and neighbors also noticed that Michelle didn't express much emotion or seem to grieve for her missing child. During a press conference where she announced her son's disappearance and asked for help, many people felt she seemed too calm, speaking in a flat tone that resembled reading from a script. This observation increased suspicion. Although her relatives insisted she was deeply affected and just kept her emotions in check because of her personality, the inconsistencies in her behavior raised concerns. Michelle's account of her child's disappearance was inconsistent and raised suspicions. In the month after Timothy went missing, she kept adding more details to her story during each interaction with the police. Her narrative changed drastically. What initially seemed like a case of carelessness transformed into a kidnapping involving different attackers, first two men, then a man and a woman. This left law enforcement officials uncertain about the truth. Michelle believed her son was being held captive. She based this belief on a call from an anonymous individual who claimed that Timothy would be returned within a month if she remained calm. This is why she seemed so self-assured. Although this information couldn't be verified, it raised questions about why she would fabricate such a story. Her odd behavior prompted detectives to investigate her more closely. Given the time that had passed since Timothy's disappearance, they suspected he might not be found alive. Investigators checked if Michelle had received any large money transfers related to a potential sale of her son, but found no significant transactions, and her financial situation had not changed. They searched her home and car, initially suspecting that she might have harmed her son, but found no blood evidence. They went further and used luminol to detect any hidden blood stains, but again found nothing. However, Michelle's history of dishonesty led detectives and even her friends to doubt her credibility. One friend agreed to have her card tapped to try to extract a confession, but this attempt failed. Over the next 11 months, no damaging recordings or admissions were made, yet Michelle continued to offer inconsistent accounts of events. 3 extensive interviews were conducted, but aside from providing conflicting information, she did not give any new leads. Michelle struggled to understand why the detectives were so focused on her and remained convinced that her son was alive and would come back. In October 1991, an important discovery was made. A school teacher walking in the industrial area near the Raritan River found a sneaker that had a picture of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on it. It was known that Timothy loved these characters. A passerby, who had seen news reports about Timothy's disappearance, remembered that just before he went missing, Michelle had bought him similar shoes. Believing there might be a connection, the passerby contacted law enforcement for further investigation. When the sneaker was first shown to Michelle, she denied it was the same shoe she had bought for her son and listed several identifying features. However, She later hesitated and suggested that the shoe could possibly belong to Tim. This change in her story raised suspicion. The police continued their investigation and found that Michelle had previously worked at the industrial complex close to where a sneaker were discovered, coinciding with the time when Timothy went missing. Notably, she had not mentioned this to the detectives. Colleagues reported that her behavior changed after Timothy's disappearance. She frequently took walks by the stream bank, her workplace, during lunch breaks without providing any explanation. After the first sneaker was found, concerning rumors began to spread, which led FBI agents to investigate the area more thoroughly. During a search along the stream bank, investigators found a skull and 10 other bones in and around a truck tire that had been dredged from the bottom of Red Root Creek. These were located near pieces of the boy's clothing, a pillowcase, a Ninja Turtles balloon, and a blue and white blanket that were buried in an embankment 6.1 meters from the creek bed where the bones were discovered. Law enforcement agencies received these remains on April 23, 1992. Strikingly, Michelle showed no emotional response when informed about this discovery. Fibers and hair taken from the blanket were analyzed, but they did not match Michelle's hair, Timothy's, or anyone from her family. The child's body was also examined closely, and dental records confirmed that the skull belonged to Tim. However, due to the missing skeletal bones and the complete decomposition of soft tissue, the medical examiner could not determine the cause of the child's death. By this time, Michelle had begun a new chapter in her life, moving to a neighboring state as if nothing had happened. At that point, there was no evidence linking her to the alleged murder, and the investigation went cold. However, more strange events involving her were yet to unfold. In January 1994, Michelle found herself back in the news. She made national headlines by sharing a terrifying story about how 2 federal agents kidnapped her outside her home. They threatened her with a gun, forced her into a car, and drove her to Detroit, where they eventually let her go. She managed to find her way back home on her own. Michelle reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, reporting that 2 men had called her multiple times, threatening her while pretending to be agents. They insisted that she cooperate and confess to Timothy's murder. Despite their pressure, Michelle maintained her innocence, which she claimed resulted in her kidnapping. Her story captured national attention, shocking the public. Opinions were sharply divided. Some people were furious and called for the authorities to stop harassing her, while others supported the agents' unorthodox methods to extract a confession from a woman they suspected of killing her son. When she returned from Detroit, a note appeared on her door that read, "It's not over." It was thought that she had placed this note herself to support her fabricated kidnapping narrative. Michelle admitted to faking her own kidnapping by taking a bus to Detroit but refused to discuss her conflicting accounts of Timmy's disappearance any further. In March 1995, she was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest and 3 years of probation for the FBI hoax. The Sayreville police believed she staged the kidnapping to avoid being implicated in an investigation of her boyfriend, a police officer from neighboring Union County, who had been accused of improperly checking the license plates of cars that Michelle claimed were following her. In May, the police department decided not to take any action against him in relation to the charges. In 1997, while pregnant with her second child, Michelle pleaded guilty to stealing a computer from a former employer to give to her police officer boyfriend as a Christmas present. Upon receiving the computer, he realized it had been stolen and reported it. She was subsequently sentenced to house arrest for 4 months and was also placed on probation for an additional 3 years. Meanwhile, Timothy's case remained unsolved and had reached a dead end, with even FBI agents unable to make progress. The technology available in the 1990s did not permit a detailed analysis of the evidence needed to obtain physical proof against Timothy's biological mother. Shortly after her sentence was handed down in 1998, Michelle moved to Florida, and in 1999, she relocated to Apple Valley, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis, where she married in 2001 and started a new family. Timothy was not forgotten. In the early 2010s, the case file and evidence were still stored as they were, and the district attorney's office did little more than follow up on occasional tips. After a tip around the 20th anniversary of Timothy Wiltsey's disappearance, which had nothing to do with the case, Scott Crocco, an investigator with the office, decided it was time to revisit the investigation and see if there was anything that could help solve the case. He focused on the blanket. Investigators reasoned that the boy would not have carried a large blanket through the carnival on the humid 90 degrees Fahrenheit day he went missing. They concluded that the blanket had been taken from Ladzinski's South Amboy home to cover the boy after he died, even though she denied ever having owned such a blanket. Detectives believe that the blanket should have been recognized by people who had interacted with Michelle before her child's murder and then reconnected with her relatives and friends afterward. Several witnesses, including former co-workers, reported seeing Michelle using the blanket. In the early 2000s, Michelle lived in Minnesota with her new husband and their son. After their marriage ended in 2003, Michelle moved to Florida while pregnant with her third child. In Florida, she gave birth, purchased a home, settled in with her two children, and worked as a paralegal at a law firm. She kept photos of her firstborn son, who had passed away, to honor his memory and ensure her children knew he had existed. The investigation into his death is ongoing. Krakow interviewed Jennifer Blair Dilcher, the niece who met Michelle at the carnival shortly after Michelle said she couldn't find her son. In the years that followed, Jennifer, who had initially supported her aunt, married and had two children of her own, but also became addicted to banned substance. She went to Florida for rehab, leaving the children with Michelle during that time. While Jennifer was in the program, Michelle and Jennifer's mother decided that Jennifer's condition was serious enough that they could not return the children after she completed the program, so they placed them with Jennifer's mother-in-law, whom Jennifer greatly disliked. It took Jennifer some time to regain custody of the children, and she considered Michelle's decision a betrayal. At Krakow's behest, Jennifer began contacting her aunt on Facebook about the case, hoping that Michelle might confess or make some incriminating statement. After being unsuccessful, Krakow showed Jennifer blankets, pillowcases, and a red jacket. She immediately told him that the blanket had been in Michelle's apartment and that Timothy had wrapped himself in it during her babysitting sessions. Two other women who helped care for Timothy also recognized the blanket. This evidence established a crucial connection. It became evident that the blanket couldn't have been mistakenly left near the body, suggesting that Michelle had intentionally brought it to the industrial complex, thinking the body would remain undiscovered there. On August 6, 2014, what would have been Timmy's 29th birthday, following a sealed grand jury indictment, Michelle Ladzinski was arrested in Florida and charged with his son's murder. Prosecutors believed they had sufficient evidence to secure a conviction for first-degree murder. The hearings drew a crowd of concerned individuals, and opinions were mixed. The trial was difficult and stretched from March to May 2016. The only new evidence presented was the testimony of several witnesses stating that the blanket found near the boy belonged to his mother. Jennifer testified at her aunt's trial, claiming she saw the blanket in Michelle's home and believed in Michelle's guilt. However, several witnesses said they had never seen the blanket in Michelle's home, and there were no photographs showing it with her and the boy. Fibers and hairs taken from the blanket were re-examined, providing more detailed analyses than the microscopic tests done in 1991. Unfortunately, these results showed that none of the hairs belonged to Michelle or Tim. Additionally, the prosecution pointed to Michelle's strange behavior. Her inconsistent statements and her calmness when discussing Timothy seemed to suggest her involvement. However, the defense attorney effectively argued that this evidence was insufficient to label the defendant a murderer. The location where the remains were found was only a few hundred meters from the building where Michelle Ladzinski worked at that time. It was an inconspicuous area that almost no one visited. Michelle was aware of this and may have deliberately chosen this place to hide the body. The prosecutor was convinced that there was too much circumstantial evidence, all of which pointed to the boy's mother. However, Michelle's lawyer argued that from May 25, 1991 to April 1992, when the body was discovered, several major storms had occurred. Independent experts confirmed that the Red Root stream, near which the skull and belongings were found, had overflowed its banks. It was located not far from the amusement park where Timothy disappeared, so the water could have carried evidence to that location. This was indirectly supported by the fact that many fragments of the boy's skeleton were never found. The prosecutor's approach had evolved since the investigation in the 1990s. They argued that Timothy had never gone to the amusement park. He had actually been missing long before then. A new theory was presented to the jury. Michelle had gone to the park alone after disposing of her son and had asked relatives to pretend an abduction had occurred. Meanwhile, Michelle's testimony kept changing. The defense attorney provided an explanation for Michelle's unusual behavior. An independent psychiatric evaluation revealed that she has antisocial personality disorder, which may have contributed to her confusing and inconsistent stories. The lawyer noted that the disorder became particularly evident in 1991, right after her son went missing. This was used to explain her strange actions, which were seen as responses to extreme stress and trauma. The evaluation confirmed the diagnosis, with evidence suggesting troubling behaviors. Consequently, the lawyer argued that Michelle's dishonest claims, including her stories about kidnapping, were a result of her illness. At trial, the prosecution argued that Michelle had murdered her son. They claimed that due to giving birth at a very young age, she faced ongoing financial and emotional challenges. Timothy had grown up during a particularly tough time in Michelle's life. Timothy did not have a relationship with his father, George. Michelle kept George from having contact with him and consistently turned down any offers of assistance. With no support system, she struggled to improve her circumstances, and her relationships with men were unsuccessful, which further complicated her situation. The Lodzinski family was divided during the hearings. Michelle's father and sister believed she was a good mother, while her brother and niece, Jennifer, suggested she may have been involved in Timothy's death. Michelle's defense also presented testimony from an Arizona man who claimed that a former inmate from Georgia had confessed to him that he had abused and killed a young boy somewhere near Atlanta. The testimony did not provide any evidence that the man was in the Sayreville area at the time of Timothy Wiltsey's disappearance, and the man himself denied this on the stand. Prosecutors further questioned the Arizona man's credibility by pointing out that he had previously accused another man of assaulting and abusing him. Another witness testified for the defense about a possible third party, a resident of an apartment complex near the festival, who saw several men throw something about 4 feet long, wrapped in white cloth, into the trunk of a car before driving away quickly without turning on the headlights. After hearing testimony from 68 witnesses, the jury began deliberating in May. The next day, a week before the 25th anniversary of Timothy's disappearance, the jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. Sentencing was scheduled for August 2016 but was postponed as Michelle's attorneys appealed the judge's earlier rulings regarding jury misconduct and insufficient evidence. Shortly thereafter, the defense moved for a judgment of default, requesting the judge to vacate the conviction and acquit her on the grounds that the evidence was insufficient for a reasonable jury to convict. The judge denied this motion, and in January 2017, he sentenced Michelle Lodzinski to 30 years in state prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, the jury told reporters that their opinions were mixed. Not all of them believed she was guilty. They were particularly influenced by the unusual testimony from Michelle, which implied that she was hiding something. However, they questioned why she would do that if she were innocent. Immediately after, Michelle's defense team approached the case with renewed determination. They aimed to have her acquitted, emphasizing that there was no physical evidence linking her to Timothy's death. Extensive checks and tests were conducted, but there were no traces of the boy's blood or any indication that Michelle had harmed him or concealed his body. After their appeal was denied, the lawyer escalated the case to the Supreme Court, highlighting the uncertainty surrounding Timothy's cause of death. He proposed that Timothy might have simply run away from the park and died from natural causes, insisting that no one had killed him. Additionally, he pointed out that several legal standards required for a murder charge and conviction had not been met. The Chief Justice recused himself from the case, and with the remaining justices unable to reach a consensus, the guilty verdict was upheld. The defense attorney, undeterred, after the 2016 conviction, Michelle's defense team appealed, escalating the case to the New Jersey Supreme Court, where Chief Justice Stuart Rabner recused himself. On December 28, 2021, the court vacated the conviction by a 4-3 decision, citing insufficient evidence to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Michelle Lodzinski was released from Edna Mahan Correctional Facility that day, having served over 7 years. double jeopardy prevented a retrial. She reunited with her family in Florida, where she had previously relocated. Despite the legal outcome, her brother and others, including George Wiltse, continued to suspect her involvement, though no new evidence has emerged to reopen the case. After her release, Michelle's brother, who had testified against her during the trial, stated that the jury was correct in convicting her of murder. He argued that the lawyer did not rectify a significant wrong, but instead took away justice for little Tim. However, under state law, Michelle cannot be tried again for this case, even if new evidence arises in the future. The boy's biological father, George, still suspects that Michelle was involved in their son's death. He questions whether she committed the act herself or if she knows who did. Many of Michelle's family members also believe she is guilty, citing her strange behavior, inconsistent statements during interrogations, and the FBI's mishandling of the kidnapping. They are puzzled by why Michelle focused her time and energy on these issues instead of seeking the truth about her son's case. Although Timothy Wiltse's murder remains officially unsolved, many believe that his mother evaded responsibility.
Amy Beth Lord was born on December 21, 1988, in Springfield, Massachusetts. Her family moved to Wilbraham shortly after her birth, where she grew up with her two close sisters, Kimberly and Carly. The siblings shared a strong bond and enjoyed a loving family environment. After graduating high school in 2007, Amy pursued higher education at Bentley University, focusing on humanities, business, and marketing. Thanks to her remarkable intellect, she excelled academically and earned her bachelor's degree in 2011, becoming a certified marketer. Following her studies, Amy aimed to kickstart her career, relocating to Boston, Massachusetts. There, she quickly found a position as an internet marketing specialist and worked for 2 years. Life was going well. She made close friends and was in a relationship with Mike Cassell, with whom she was planning to start a family. On July 23, 2013, at 5:38 a.m., 24-year-old Amy was in the lobby of her apartment building. She had woken up early to meet her friend and co-worker, Christina Kelleher, for a gym session at 6 a.m. However, when Amy didn't arrive, Christina waited at the bus stop for a while before deciding to go to the gym alone, assuming her friend had overslept and didn't want to wake her. Although Amy was usually very punctual, Christina wasn't too concerned and expected to see her at work later, as their desks were next to each other. After finishing her workout, Christina was surprised to find that Amy was still not at the office. Feeling alarmed, she reached out to Mike, Amy's boyfriend, to check if he knew where she was. He had no idea and mentioned that he assumed Amy had gone to the gym. Over several hours, Mike and Christina tried repeatedly to reach Amy, but they were unsuccessful. At 11:30 a.m., Christina decided to contact the office manager. They had already called all of Amy's friends and acquaintances, but no one knew her whereabouts. Consequently, the management opted to report her missing to the police. After taking the report, the officers contacted Amy's parents, who had also not seen her. They agreed to meet with her relatives at her apartment in South Boston to investigate further, which happened around 2 p.m. Detectives searched the apartment for any evidence of a struggle, robbery, or other criminal activity, but found nothing out of order. Everything appeared to be in its place, and the locks were secure. It seemed that Amy had simply vanished. Her family emphasized that she led a happy and organized life. She had no plans for sudden trips and wouldn't have run away without informing anyone. They believed something must have happened to her. A contact lens belonging to Amy was discovered in the building's foyer, and there were also marks on the nearby wall that suggested a possible confrontation. To gather more information about Amy, police interviewed her parents in detail. They revealed that Amy was driving a black Jeep Cherokee SUV. Shortly after, an officer recalled that at 8:37 a.m. in southern Boston, a fire had been reported. At that location, they found an SUV fully engulfed in flames. The fire department extinguished the fire and then towed the vehicle for further investigation. The car's description matched Amy's SUV. She had not yet been officially reported missing at that time. Although the license plates were completely burned away, the lab was able to identify the chassis number of the burned vehicle, confirming that it belonged to Amy Lord. Detectives returned to the station and started verifying Amy's bank transaction data. They discovered that her bank cards had been used to withdraw money 5 times that morning, beginning at 6 a.m. The total amount withdrawn was approximately $1,000, and the withdrawals were made from different ATMs. This raised suspicions because it was unusual to withdraw money repeatedly from various locations in the city. The first transaction took place near her apartment. When the police arrived, they noticed a surveillance camera beside the ATM. They reviewed the footage, hoping to spot Amy in the morning recordings and gain insights into what happened. The process of reviewing the footage took considerable time, and officers examined recordings from all the ATMs where Amy's card had been used. They also found additional surveillance equipment on nearby buildings. All this evidence was gathered to piece together a clear timeline of events from that morning. While police were working with banks to collect footage, they received a call around 4 p.m. from a cyclist who had found a body at the Stony Brook Reservation in Hyde Park. The body was that of a young woman. Upon arrival, detectives discovered the victim was naked and had suffered over 40 stab wounds, primarily to her neck, face, and chest. There were also hand marks on her throat, suggesting she had been strangled. Her body was dumped in a secluded area covered with foxes, far from the city, but the killer did not attempt to conceal it. No identification was found. However, based on police photographs, they believed the victim was Amy Lord. Once her identity was confirmed, the missing person case transitioned into a murder investigation. The analysis of the CCTV recordings from the ATMs has been completed. The first sighting of Amy was at 6:35 a.m. She appeared alone at the ATM in her workout clothes and appeared uninjured. She used her ATM card and left. At 6:47 a.m., she arrived at another ATM just a few blocks away. This time, the camera captured her car from the outside. Amy was again unharmed and wearing sportswear. She withdrew cash by herself. However, her behavior was unusual. The police observed that, while the car was parked outside the bank, she was sitting in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. About 7 minutes later, she appeared in another video, this time with visible facial injuries, including a broken nose and several bruises, indicating she had been attacked. It seemed she had been kidnapped, yet she did not attempt to escape. Amy withdrew cash again and returned to the car, remaining in the passenger seat. Detectives tracked the car's movements throughout the city and obtained more recordings in an effort to identify the driver. The first shot showing Amy in the passenger seat and the driver behind the wheel was captured at 6:10 a.m. This helped them establish a timeline of events, but they still could not identify the driver's face. While reviewing the footage, the police noticed that the driver was hiding his face, possibly with a t-shirt or a headband. He wore a cap, and in one clip, when he adjusted it, it showed that he had a clean-shaven head. Detectives needed to find the exact moment Amy was abducted, so they continued gathering information from CCTV cameras. This effort led them to capture the moment Amy left her apartment. As soon as she opened the door, she was attacked by an unknown man who had been waiting outside. Pacing back and forth, he forced her inside, and they stayed behind the closed door for about 15 minutes. At 5:52 a.m., both of them came out and walked toward Amy's car. This suggests that the first cash withdrawal happened while she was being threatened. This information helped the police piece together the sequence of events. As soon as she left her apartment, preparing for a workout before heading to work, she was kidnapped. The attacker likely persuaded her that if she gave him enough money, he would let her go. As a result, Amy did not resist and complied with his demands. After withdrawing the required amount from her card, she was taken out of town and attacked with a knife. Following the murder, her body was left in a wooded area, and her car was set on fire. The police were unable to obtain a clear image of the suspect's face. Investigators questioned Amy's relatives to check if anyone might have wanted to harm her. but she had no known enemies. Her boyfriend had a strong alibi and was ruled out as a suspect. The attacker needed gasoline to set the car on fire. In the video footage from when the attack started, the attacker was not seen carrying anything that looked like fuel. Therefore, he must have bought it at a gas station. After the attack, he drove 10 kilometers to a country park to dispose of the body before returning. Detectives reviewed all intersections with cameras where the perpetrator might have been seen. The investigation was challenging because the victim drove a common car. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of black SUVs in the city, but her relatives pointed out a distinctive clue, a cloverleaf-shaped sticker on the rear window. This made it easier to track her car in traffic and locate the gas station where the attacker had stopped. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that station wasn't working. Detectives noticed a liquor store across the street that had a front camera. They obtained some footage, but it was too distant to clearly see the criminal's face. At around 8 a.m., the suspect arrived at a gas station without Amy. The car was recognizable because of a cloverleaf-shaped sticker. Although the driver's face was not seen, he waved at someone and approached another person. They exchanged a few words, shook hands, and then the suspect's companion left. Fortunately, this person came closer to the liquor store's CCTV camera, allowing him to be identified. The police located him, had a conversation, and he revealed that he met his friend, 28-year-old Edwin Alamany, near the gas station. At 8 a.m., Edwin was in a black SUV that had not been seen before. He previously worked as a waiter's assistant and was currently unemployed. Early in the morning, on July 23, 2013, around 4:23, another resident of South Boston, Alexandra Cruz, was attacked just before Amy was kidnapped. Alexandra was walking to her job at Dunkin' Donuts when a stranger assaulted her in the parking lot, hitting her in the jaw and causing her to briefly lose consciousness. The attacker then began to strangle her, but suddenly stopped, claiming he had made a mistake and was looking for someone else. He threatened to kill her if she screamed. He took her valuables and turned away for a moment, giving her the chance to escape. Despite his threat that she would be killed if she reported him, Alexandra did not keep quiet. Once she arrived at work, she called the police. About an hour later, an officer came to take her statement, and they created a composite sketch of the assailant. During the investigation at Amy's apartment, the police received another urgent call. Around midnight in South Boston, a girl was stabbed. Detectives quickly recognized that this crime occurred near Amy Lord's apartment. This led them to believe they were dealing with a serial attacker, as there had already been 3 similar incidents involving girls. The investigation needed to continue, as the officers received a new call. 21-year-old Kaylee Ballantyne was attacked shortly after midnight. She was the only daughter in her family, raised alongside 2 older brothers, which may have contributed to her ability to defend herself. Her parents described her as a fighter from a young age. All the children in the family were athletic, but despite her delicate appearance, Kaylee displayed remarkable strength, sometimes even outdoing her brothers. In 2003, when she was just 11, she faced a serious incident when a basketball backboard fell on her head, leaving her in a coma for a month. Fortunately, she survived, recovered fully, and even resumed playing hockey. When the police spoke with the victim of the latest attack, Kaylee was injured, but still alive and able to recount her night. She had been working and was heading home around midnight. With her headphones on, she didn't notice any danger right away. As she approached her apartment, she noticed a suspicious-looking man on the opposite side of the street. He was large and appeared to be watching her. Then, he crossed over to her side, stopped, and stared at her for about 5 seconds. This made her feel uneasy, so Kaylee hurried her steps. She got to her apartment and went to enter the code to get in. Initially, she entered it wrong, but got it right on the second try. When Kaylee opened the door, the man was right behind her. He put his hand on her left shoulder and pushed her through the door, his right hand holding a knife to her head. Kaylee fell to the floor, and the attacker pushed down on her, sitting on top of her. She pleaded for her life, asking him to take anything he wanted, but he began to stab her without saying a word. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Kaylee crossed her left arm over her chest and started to fight back with her right hand. She also kicked at him. During the struggle, she successfully knocked the attacker's hand away, causing him to accidentally hurt himself and loosen his grip. Sports weren't merely a hobby for Kaylee, she was a professional athlete, strong and resilient, which helped her find the strength to fight back. This moment gave her the opportunity to save her life. After her attacker fell backwards and Simple walked away. As he walked away, Kaylee slammed the door behind him so he couldn't come back. She remembered that she didn't know how many times she had been stabbed and that she didn't really feel any pain when it happened. She tried to stand up, but she collapsed and her chest tightened. She wondered if it was her adrenaline, if she was dying, and knew she needed to get into her apartment. Kaylee said that for some reason, her apartment key was in her pocket, which made it much easier, so she crawled to the apartment door, unlocked it, and went inside. Once inside, she crawled to her first roommate's room and told her that she had just been stabbed and that she needed her to get towels, tissues, or anything to stitch up the wound and then call 911. She insisted on calling her loved ones, worried that she might not make it through the attack. Her friends stayed calm and encouraged her to call emergency services first. Meanwhile, the neighbor took a video of everything Kaylee said. Remarkably, she managed to remain calm, even though she had sustained serious injuries: 2 stab wounds to her face and 2 to her neck. In total, the attacker had stabbed her 9 times, with 1 wound puncturing her left lung and another coming dangerously close to her heart. The trial of Edwin Alemany started in 2015 and lasted for 14 days. The key witness for the prosecution was Kaylee, the survivor. During her testimony, she displayed such inner strength that Edwin could not even look her in the eye. Alexander Cruz, the first victim, also testified against him. Edwin's defense attorney attempted to downplay his violent behavior, arguing that Edwin had tried to end his own life by cutting his wrists, which resulted in scratches on his neck and arms. Ultimately, Edwin was found guilty of first-degree murder for Amy's death, armed robbery, aggravated assault with a weapon, and attempted murder of Kaylee Ballantyne and Alexander Cruz. He never accepted responsibility or showed any regret for his actions. On June 9, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Amy and received an additional 35 years for the attacks on Kaylee and Alexander. When Kaylee gave her final statement, she shared her challenges in trying to live a normal life. Her heartfelt words brought many people in the courtroom to tears. Amy's parents gave Kaylee their late daughter's necklace as a token of gratitude for her testimony, which helped convict a dangerous criminal. However, Edwin, the criminal, never showed any remorse. In October 2020, he approached a federal judge to complain that his lawyers had been ineffective by opting for an insanity defense and admitting his guilt without his consent, despite him claiming he was innocent. In 2021, the state Supreme Court upheld his conviction. Edwin then hired a new lawyer and tried to formulate a different strategy to gain immediate release by pointing out the mistakes made by his previous attorney and the prosecution. However, these attempts were unsuccessful. After Kaylee recovered from her injuries, she returned to school and graduated from university. She lived in Boston until Edwin's case was resolved. After that, she decided to move to California to find peace away from big cities, hoping to cope with her post-traumatic stress disorder. Gradually, she healed from her psychological trauma and even began to dream again, which felt like a significant achievement. During this period, she felt intense anger towards Edwin for taking Amy's life and nearly ending hers too. Kaylee struggled to understand what could drive someone to such senseless cruelty. Over time, however, she began to feel pity for Edwin, recognizing the flaws in his character that led to his actions. Eventually, she wrote him a letter of forgiveness, but never sent it. It remained in her desk for 2 years. Then Kaylee tried to contact Edwin's lawyer but received no response. Later, during a sermon about forgiveness at her church, she was reminded of the man who nearly took her life. Coincidentally, the pastor was visiting the prison where Edwin was held, so Kaylee asked him to deliver her letter. 2 weeks later, she received a response. In his letter, Edwin discussed his hard childhood. He was born in Puerto Rico and moved to the United States without speaking English. He shared the difficulties he encountered both at work and in his personal life, including experiences of bullying during his childhood. These challenges resulted in behavioral issues that ultimately led to him being in juvenile prison for a significant part of his youth. Initially, Kaylee felt compassion for him after reading the letter, but a few weeks later, she discovered that he was trying to appeal his case, claiming that his tough upbringing had broken him. This revelation made her question his sincerity, as she suspected he was trying to gain her sympathy. As a result, she decided not to reply to him. In the end, his appeal was denied, and he remains in prison. Kaylee hopes he is attending school and working on self-improvement. She believes he didn't ruin her life. Instead, he improved it. Kaylee has decided to turn her circumstances into something positive and feels happier than ever. Even though she faces daily anxiety and various challenges, she continues attending therapy and strives to maintain a positive outlook. After spending some time in California, she returned to Maine, where she currently resides. As a public speaker, she shares her story to inspire and support others who have experienced trauma. About a year ago, she stepped back from public speaking and is now seeking new ways to share her message. Kaylee feels passionate about her story because it has the potential to connect with others and create positive change in their lives. Currently, she works in marketing, is in a loving relationship, and has recently purchased her first home. Christopher Moyer was born on May 21, 1967, into a middle-class family. He valued independence and believed that education was the key to achieving it. Although he didn't have many friends, this didn't bother him much, as he spent most of his free time studying. After finishing school, he attended college, where he developed a strong interest in computers and technology. His dream was to become self-employed after earning his degree. Beyond his career goals, he also dreamed of starting a family. By 2010, Christopher was 44 years old and had realized his aspirations. He was self-employed, working as his own boss, and happily married. He lived in a spacious house in Pennsylvania with his wife and son. He worked as a freelance computer specialist, assembling custom computers for clients from his home. His wife, Irina Moyer, was skilled in electronics and assisted him with his work. She was born on August 12, 1971, which made her 39 years old in 2010. Irina was originally from Ukraine and had moved to the United States in search of a better life. She met Christopher in April 2002 during a challenging time in his life. He was going through a difficult divorce from his first wife, with whom he had no children. This experience left Christopher longing for a large, loving family. Irina also shares this dream and hopes to build a new life in the United States. Their relationship developed quickly, and later, that same year, they decided to get married. They began planning for their future, which included moving out of Christopher's bachelor home to a place more suitable for a family. Before they could find a new home, Irina discovered she was pregnant. In 2003, they purchased a large, cozy house in a quiet suburb of Orrington. The area was peaceful, scenic, and much safer than the bustling city where Christopher had previously lived. Although the local residents formed a close-knit community, the Moyers were more reserved, choosing to keep to themselves. Over the years, neighbors described them as withdrawn and rarely seen in the neighborhood. While they didn't socialize or attend local gatherings, they weren't entirely disconnected. For example, Christopher once arranged for shared use of a snowblower with his neighbors. However, in most cases, the family preferred solving problems independently. On September 25, 2003, Irina gave birth to their first and only child, Dylan Moyer. By 2010, Dylan was 7 years old and thriving in school. Having successfully completed the first grade, he was a bright, intelligent child, and his parents were incredibly proud of him. Teachers, both from his kindergarten and primary school, regularly praised Dylan for his abilities. Much of his success stemmed from the active involvement of both his parents in his education. Being highly educated themselves, Christopher and Irina prioritized their son's learning and supported him every step of the way. While they avoided participating in the neighborhood's social life, they always attended school meetings together, demonstrating their dedication to helping Dylan succeed in both academics and life. Christopher was known as a calm, grounded individual, and his wife, Irina, shared many of his qualities. Both were thoughtful and quiet, preferring action over conversation. Their closest neighbor, Rose Radziul, knew them better than anyone else in the area. Although they were on friendly terms, Rose described Christopher and Irina as reserved, meek, and silent. Their interactions with her rarely extended beyond simple greetings and polite exchanges. Notably, Rose noticed that Christopher had a tendency to be controlling and domineering towards Irina. She noticed that Irina seemed to become more withdrawn when she was with Christopher, often avoiding communication so as not to upset him. Their son, Dylan, however, was different. Teachers regarded him as an exceptionally bright and curious boy. By kindergarten, he had a vocabulary beyond his years and often impressed or puzzled adults with his questions. Dylan's primary school teacher was particularly fond of him, recognizing his great potential early on. Instead of playing typical games for children his age, Dylan showed an interest in scientific literature, often reading during his free time. Like his parents, he was not highly social, but he maintained good relationships with his peers. Irina was described as a loving and devoted mother who prioritized her son's well-being and development. Despite her shy and unsociable personality, Christopher, similarly, was regarded as a caring father, deeply invested in Dylan's well-being. According to relatives, the family had created a warm and nurturing home environment, rooted in love for each other and their child. A few months before the tragedy, the family had even taken a trip to Disneyland, making the events of June 17, 2011 all the more shocking. At 9:40 p.m. on that fateful Friday, 44-year-old Christopher called emergency services. He calmly confessed to killing his wife and son with a baseball bat, stating that both were dead and refusing to offer any first aid. His cold and detached tone during the call was unsettling, as if he were discussing something mundane. He gave a detailed account of the crime, describing how he had killed Irina by beating her to death before attacking their son Dylan. He even supplied his personal information and the family's home address, thanked the dispatcher, and hung up. Emergency responders rushed to the Moyer family home, where they encountered a chilling scene. When no one answered the door, authorities initially suspected Christopher had barricaded himself inside and might be armed. A note taped outside listed the names and contact details of relatives, suggesting that Christopher had prepared for what was to come. Neighbors began to gather, watching the tense situation unfold. The police believed Christopher might resist arrest, but then someone noticed one of the family's cars was missing. This raised the possibility that Christopher had fled. By 2 a.m., officers entered the home through an open garage door. They proceeded cautiously, weapons drawn, but found no one alive inside. Instead, they were met with a gruesome scene. On the second floor, they discovered two bodies, 7-year-old Dylan and 39-year-old Irina. Both had suffered severe head trauma from a blunt object, their skulls brutally disfigured. Irina's body was found in the bathroom adjacent to the main bedroom. Bloodstains and drag marks suggested that her body had been moved there after the attack. A towel was also placed over her face, a gruesome detail that added to the haunting scene. Christopher, however, was nowhere to be found. Dylan's room was nearby. He was found in his bedroom with injuries similar to those of Irina. A bloody baseball bat, believed to be the murder weapon, was lying next to his body. The bat was sent to a lab for analysis, as the caller on the emergency line had predicted. The police activity quickly attracted the attention of the neighbors, especially Rose, who was close to the family. When Rose goes to find out what is going on, she is horrified by the brutal attack on the Moyer family and is even more shocked when she hears Christopher confess over the phone that he killed his own family. The police immediately questioned Rose, hoping she might have heard or seen something since she was at home during the time of the murders. However, Rose stated that she hadn't heard any screams or disturbances, only the sound of a car engine leaving the Moyer residence, which she assumed was Christopher fleeing the scene. She also noted that she hadn't noticed anything unusual or any warning signs of such a violent event. Rose shared detailed information about the family, with the police being particularly interested in Christopher, who was missing. They needed to determine the direction he might have gone in and whether he had taken a weapon with him, as one neighbor had suggested. Christopher had reportedly told the emergency dispatcher that he planned to wait for the police to arrive. Yet, for reasons unknown, he was gone by the time officers reached the crime scene. Rose described Christopher as calm and introverted, adding that she couldn't imagine him committing such an atrocity. She noted that, although he wasn't very affectionate towards his wife, they seemed happy in public, and she had never seen him argue with his wife or scold his son. Forensic experts and detectives thoroughly combed the crime scene, working to piece together what had transpired. No signs of a break-in were discovered, and all the available evidence pointed to Christopher's responsibility for the attack. Fearing that his mental state had deteriorated and that he might harm someone else, authorities launched an urgent manhunt. Despite this, Christopher's actions didn't fit the profile of a typical serial killer or maniac. 2 hours after police arrived at the house, they were still searching intensively for Christopher. They tried reaching him on his mobile phone, but he didn't respond to any calls. During the investigation, security footage from a nearby camera captured Christopher's car, narrowing down the potential routes he could have taken. Road services and patrol units were alerted and stationed at strategic points in an effort to intercept him. Yet Christopher seemed to have vanished. At 12:56 a.m., a witness from a neighboring town called Hadborough rang the police. The caller, a train engineer, reported finding a body on the railway tracks. Tragically, the man on the tracks matched Christopher's description. According to the engineer, the train was unable to stop in time to avoid hitting the man. Authorities arrived at the scene and found a body, later identified as Christopher, through documents found in his possession. His pocket contained $300 in cash and car keys. A dark Toyota Camry, registered to Christopher, was located near the railroad crossing. The police concluded that Christopher had deliberately ended his life shortly after the murders. He appeared to have been familiar with the train's schedule and intentionally positioned himself on the tracks to coincide with the arrival of an oncoming train. As a result, the entire Moyer family died, leaving many unanswered questions about this horrific incident. Irina's parents, along with her brother and sister-in-law, were in a neighboring town when the news broke. The police contacted them to inform them of the deaths of Irina, Dylan, and Christopher. During questioning, the family revealed that the Moyers had planned to visit them that weekend. According to their plans, Christopher, Irina, and Dylan were supposed to drive over on Saturday night. After the visit, Dylan was meant to stay with his grandparents for a few days, while his parents spent time alone together, with the grandparents later returning Dylan home. The tragic events, however, unfolded just days before this planned visit. Shortly before the tragic events, Irina's parents tried to call her, but their calls went unanswered. They were not overly concerned, assuming the family had gone to bed early to prepare for their long journey. Relatives of theirs stated that they had spoken with the Moyers on Friday morning, when both Irina and Christopher seemed cheerful and did not mention any issues. They were busy making final preparations for their trip. Neither Irina nor Christopher had a history of mental health problems, which made the tragic events even more shocking. Christopher's parents were also informed of the tragedy. His father reported speaking with him on the same day and noted nothing unusual or alarming. Christopher had mentioned extending a contract with a major client, which made him optimistic about his upcoming weekend plans and improving his financial situation. Their family had been dealing with financial struggles recently due to the instability of freelance work. Christopher had expressed concerns about potentially losing their home, but the issue appeared to have been resolved. It seemed he was simply worried that such financial difficulties could return. When friends and family were questioned, none could provide a motive for the tragedy. Christopher, described as a loving husband and father, seemed incapable of such violence. What could have driven him to kill his entire family and take his own life? Their family was private, rarely sharing details of their personal lives. The medical examiner's office conducted autopsies on Irina and Dylan. Both were found to have died from multiple blunt force head injuries inflicted with extreme force and determination. However, these findings provided no insight into why Christopher, a man with no history of depression or violent tendencies, would commit such a horrific act. Family members described Irina as loyal to her husband, leading a quiet life with minimal social interactions beyond her neighbors and her child's teachers. Their relationship was considered healthy and loving. Christopher was seen as a hard-working man who provided for his family and never displayed depressive behaviors or violent tendencies. Adding to the mystery, Christopher left no suicide note to shed light on what led to this devastating act. Key documents found in the house revealed crucial details. Investigators discovered that the family was at risk of losing their $450,000 home. Christopher had received a foreclosure notice just days before the tragedy, and they lacked the funds to resolve their financial troubles. This crushing reality may have driven Christopher to despair. It is believed that he had planned to harm himself, but in his state of anguish and loss of reason, he could not bear to leave his wife and children to face poverty and hardship. He may have convinced himself that killing his family was a way to shield them from future suffering. Despite this theory, the exact motive remains uncertain. Detectives carefully examined all evidence and consulted psychiatric experts on such behavior. Typically, such actions are linked to underlying mental health problems. However, Christopher had no diagnosed mental health illnesses and exhibited no signs of significant struggles beforehand. Relatives shared that Christopher had been deeply stressed by financial issues. Their family had previously faced the threat of losing their home in 2006, but succeeded in overcoming the challenge. The family lived modestly, but this time, the situation appeared dire and irreparable. There was no evidence to suggest that Christopher had been struggling with severe mental health issues or that he had planned the tragedy long in advance. Experts instead believe the decision may have been impulsive, driven by the overwhelming tension that Christopher had quietly been battling on his own. Christopher's father was aware that his son would never seek help from a psychiatrist, no matter how severe the situation became. There had been a suspicion that Christopher might have used illegal substances, but this was proven false. Toxicological tests confirmed that his blood was clean. However, this detail provided another clue. Christopher was not taking any prescribed medication, indicating that he had avoided seeking medical help for his anxiety or other possible issues. The forensic investigation continued, uncovering troubling evidence. The blood found on a baseball bat near Dylan's body was identified as belonging to both Dylan and Irina. Fingerprints on the other end of the stick showed it was Christopher's. Besides, footprints and additional evidence from the family home allowed investigators to piece together the tragic sequence of events. The Friday morning when the tragedy unfolded had seemed normal, but Christopher had likely already made his decision. A trip was planned for the following day, and his wife and son went to bed early that evening. Christopher, however, stayed awake, unable to sleep. At some point, he retrieved a baseball bat from the garage and waited for his family to fall into a deep sleep. He did not want to make noise or raise suspicion. Christopher's actions suggested that he wanted to carry out his plans swiftly, though calling it humane would be a stretch. He first entered the bedroom he shared with his wife and attacked her suddenly. The first blow to her head caused fatal injuries, leaving her unable to scream or resist. Christopher proceeded to strike her multiple times, breaking her skull. He likely believed that ensuring her death quickly was necessary. Irina succumbed to internal bleeding within minutes, and forensic evidence showed that she had no defensive wounds, indicating she had been caught completely off guard. Next, Christopher turned to his son, Dylan, who was asleep in his room. He killed him in the same manner, with the boy unaware of what was happening. Afterward, Christopher dragged his wife's body to the bathroom adjacent to their bedroom, leaving a blood trail behind. The reason for this act remains unknown. Additionally, he covered her face with a towel, a gesture often associated with remorseful killers who cannot bear to look at the consequences of their actions. After the murders, Christopher did not immediately call emergency services. Instead, he wrote a note listing the contact information of family members, presumably to assist authorities in reaching them. He also sent a text message to his father, apologizing. At the time, his father had no idea what had occurred and did not understand the gravity of the message. The violent events were entirely unexpected and shocking, even to those closest to Christopher. After bidding farewell to his family and leaving behind clues, Christopher called 911 to confess his actions. However, he did not wait for the police to arrive. He needed to act quickly to position himself at a reachable section of the train tracks before it was too late. This urgency may explain why he left no explanation for his actions in his note. He also chose not to leave a will, possibly because the family possessed very few valuables. Only 2 cars remained. Their most valuable property had already been lost, and they had no savings. A key document found in the house provided critical insight into the double murder. It revealed that the family had been struggling with financial problems for an extended period. Christopher's freelance work was insufficient to support a family of 3. Years earlier, he had faced the risk of losing their home for the first time. Thankfully, they managed to make the necessary payments in 2006 and kept their house. However, their financial situation deteriorated further in 2010. By September of that year, debts were mounting once again. Family members and neighbors suspected that the financial troubles were linked to money and real estate. Unfortunately, Christopher had kept his struggles private and did not ask for help, so no one realized how severe their situation had become, not even his relatives. Psychiatric experts concluded that Christopher decided to kill his family when he realized they were unable to escape their financial difficulties. In his distorted reasoning, he believed that taking their lives was the only way to spare them from a life of poverty. His disturbed state of mind led him to view this act as a twisted form of mercy. After the investigation was concluded, the case was closed. Irina and Dylan Moyer were buried together in Pennsylvania, near a city nearby. There is less information available about Christopher's funeral, but it is known that he was buried separately, far from his wife and child. Irina's family insisted on this, as they believed it was unfair to bury the murderer with Irina and Dylan.